One of the examples was us that we I think the first one. So you're on your way.
Right now, right? Yeah. You know that's
For food.
She's not in her suit.
You looked a little back.
Seems to work pretty well.
It's better than the smell.
Yeah, the aqua was like.
Our cell phone sleeves. We have the Army Cadets of Bakersfield here today. These values that we as CRC can identify with. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of the colors.
Hold. Right. Face. Present. Cut.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Colors. Right. Face. Forward. March. Come left. March. Halt. Left.
You may now be seated. Trust Network Conference doesn't sound that great. I think it does. So my name is Astrid Acuna. I am here as your MC for today. And I'm not only here as your MC, I'm also here as the communications chair for CRC WIN, role that I've been in since the inception of this group for the past year. And the purpose of this conference is to show you exactly that path, the path that we've been in for the past year. Also to share valuable tools for CRC employees as diversity and inclusion, and as the presentations that we will be watching from our speakers today. This synergizes what we focus on during our monthly power lunches, that's right, our monthly power lunches, and other WIN events. We would like to welcome everyone, especially our senior management and the executive team for their presence and support in this event. Thank you for being here. As a quick program overview, as you can see in the programs that were handed out this morning, we will have two amazing keynote speakers for the day. Both of them are women and they own their own companies. We will have two breaks, one from 10 to 10:15 and the other one from 2 to 2:15. The lunch will be a buffet style and it will be from 11:30 to 12:30 with a short grill or proceed to the lobby downstairs. We have also two Wi-Fi networks, the club and PC ballroom. The password is petroleum, how convenient. All lowercase, self-determined. They helped get this group started. And I would have never had the chance to meet them if it wasn't because of this group. Katie Sanders, she was chosen as the WIN chair after leading the kickoff committee. She currently leads the steering committee working to define and establish our mission and to connect the group with resources to help us fulfill that mission. She's currently a mechanical integrity engineer in Long Beach, and she's responsible for managing the mechanical integrity program for the tank and vessel equipment in the LA Basin. Previously, she served as the facilities project engineer at Elk Hills and Bakersfield. The second lady is Mandy Crouch. In between looking for gas, as she calls it, she is the vice chair for CRC WIN, and early on was focused on helping the group develop their brand. With the help of the steering committee, of the rest of the steering committee, she is now focused on continuously guiding the group towards the direction of success and value creation. Mandy has 12 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, in both Canada and the US. Her experience has been in engineering design, facilities engineering, project management, and now operations, with her recent move up to Sacramento as the current surface manager for that area. I am very glad to call these ladies up here. Katie and Mandy, please.
Hi everyone. I'm so excited that you all are here today. So most of you probably know what WIN is, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But I'm also sure that some of you decided to come just because you saw that there was some free lunch and day out of the office. So for you, we're going to give you a quick background about how WIN came to be. So last September, we had a kickoff for a group of 175 employees across 12 different locations. And the main goal for this network was to connect people, connect everyone with the network, and to give everyone an opportunity to get to know each other. But really, as we started to have, after this kickoff, we realized that through our steering committee meetings and discussions with our sponsors and our champions, we realized that there was an opportunity and a desire to do more. So with our new aspirations in mind, we needed to define a mission that included more than just building a network of women.
So we proceeded to revise our mission statement. After the revision, we realized that we had this opportunity to provide more to CRC than just a means for connecting people throughout various locations. We could provide professional development opportunities to all the employees, tools that would be useful to everyone, not just women. We could be another venue to connect managers with individual contributors, as well as highlight the accomplishments of women across CRC, therefore encouraging others to take on challenges for continuous growth and development. we were providing a venue for leadership skill development for those of us that were on the steering committee, as well as those who are in our subcommittees as well. CRC WIN has actually come a long way in the past year. A few of our event highlights from this year that we have been able to participate in is power lunches. So I think Astrid mentioned the power lunches. We actually offer them once a month, and we've been offering these to fill the needs that have been identified by fellow members. Some of the power lunches that we've experienced in the past year are women in the workplace, creating your brand. We developed a business acumen series, centered leadership, building self-confidence. We've also participated in several conferences, like the WE conference last year. We have another WE conference coming up in October, and 2 women's conferences, one in Bakersfield and one in Anaheim, as well as Women's Business Symposium. We've also been lucky to participate in a training course, which the first series was professional branding, and we'll continuously offer one of those training courses to CRC WIN members every quarter. So how has WIN helped me? Well, WIN has actually opened a whole new world of networking within CRC for myself, and I think everyone else will agree it's done the same for them. I have met so many fabulous people that I wouldn't normally work with in my day-to-day. Now when I need to bounce ideas off of others, I have a large pool of intelligent people that I can leverage for support and idea generation. Not only that, being involved with WIN has been a huge learning experience for myself on how to create something amazing from one small idea. It's amazing to see what the power of a few intelligent people can really do. WIN means knowledge sharing, gap filling, and value creation.
My favorite thing to come out of WIN has been the opportunity to lead the strategic vision and mission planning for an organization. And being a new group, this has been really defining what is success for WIN and how do we get there. So looking at what do we actually want to achieve and what is an action plan to get to that. So in addition to that, I've really enjoyed working with a group of highly motivated people. Everyone's really energetic and so excited by the ideas to develop this network. And just having each of the steering committee members here so engaged in our mission and really bought into it has been really motivating for me personally. We all want to make CRC a better place through WIN. So with that being said, I want to recognize the steering committee. Everything achieved today, everything that we have achieved so far this year would not be possible without the extra efforts of the steering committee. You have provided the manpower to make our events happen, from power lunches and volunteer opportunities. You are making our mission become a reality through your tireless work, and I'm so proud of what we have accomplished together.
So as I call your name, please stand so that you can get your recognition that you deserve. So our Secretary and Treasurer, Linda Reeser, our Membership Chair, Sabrina Cisneros, Communications Chair, Astrid Acuna, Networking Lead, Sherry Brew, stay standing, Program Lead, Jeanette Peterson, Mentoring Lead, Shauna Edmond, Community and STEM Outreach Lead, Maria Williams, and members at large, EJ Jones, Sarah Davella, Kim Cinciocco, Mallory Harmon, Melissa Morse, Scotty Noland, and Stacy Martinez. Please join me in a round of applause. Thanks for all your hard work, ladies. Sit down. Okay, and then we also wanted to take a moment to thank all of the ladies that have been helping coordinate this lovely conference that we all have the opportunity to enjoy today.
Okay, so the first year of WIN has been, as the ladies mentioned, a year of growth, a year of a lot of learning, in leadership growth and friendships. So we have created a video to show that, to reflect that, and so that you can understand really the purpose of this group and the available opportunities in a network of resources and community outreach. that we'll continue to offer and improve on so that all employees can have the opportunity to become a part of the CRC WIN community. So please, let's play that video.
I am the chair of the Women's in Peace Network. I became a part of this group because I thought it was important to build and develop a network. The point of the group initially was just to connect women from across the whole company. We don't necessarily know each other because we work across different locations. This network was a way for us to actually get to know each other. We decided that we needed to have a different mission. We needed to really focus on personal and professional development. We're looking at what our company needs
Within CRC, and I wanted the opportunity to be a part of what this amazing group would become in the future. Creating that brand and being able to present it to senior management.
My role with WIN is the communications chair, and I volunteer for this role because I like to connect with people and I like to transmit the message, and I believe that WIN has an amazing message, and we expect to see every single one of you here with us for our power lunches or different events.
My role with WIN is the networking lead. I volunteered for that role because there was a need for it, and I had
really boost your role as an employee here at California Resources. So come and join.
My role with WIN is the program lead. I volunteered for that role because it actually makes me step out of my comfort zone. I'm sure you'll like it.
No matter the distance or the role. And mainly it has helped us grow professionally by having the tools we need for our personal success and ultimately driving the overall success of CRC. Now, we can move on to our next section of the program. She is the founder and CEO of 3.14 Communications LLC. For more than 30 years, she has joined a successful career in communications, government, politics, and advocacy for corporate interest. She brings common sense solutions to complex issues, crisis and political challenges, along with solid communication skills and a great passion for people. As I mentioned at the beginning of the day, WIN focuses on diversity and inclusion for all employees, and that is why this particular presentation will reinforce those ideas. Please welcome a longtime advocate for women's leadership who sits on the board of California Women Lead, Cassandra Pai, presenting the business case for engaging women leaders.
I'm a hugger, among other things. You'll find out. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me. I'm a mother of 4 sons. I've been yelling for most of my life. So am I up? They're right. Wonderful introduction. Thank you. This is a really fun and welcoming community, but I have to tell you, I just told Margita I have no sense of direction. I'm at the hotel across the street, and I walked around for 5 minutes. You already know what my strong suits are and are not. Katie, Mandy, Lisa, steering committee, great job, congratulations, and thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a really fun day. And a special shout out to my darling, dear former colleague and friend, Margita Thompson, who's truly one of the best in the business. So, as this is your first go-round in terms of a larger gathering, I just want to say first congratulations on taking some really concrete steps towards equity and making an investment in women's empowerment at CRC. I need you to indulge me for a couple seconds though, because I kind of like to know who's in the room. So just give me a sense of who you are. How many accountants are in the room? Any accountants? Accountants? Engineers. I'm frightened now. How many in HR? Free lunch, and breakfast, and coffee. Some time off, some time out of the office. Where's my driller?
No, the presenters, but the time in between when there's some downtime to everybody to be able to maybe meet some faces you haven't met before.
Okay, I need one of the engineers. Where's one of my engineers? What are your expectations?
My expectations are to network and see a lot of faces I don't get to see. I work.
Good. Did everybody hear her? She's going to learn some new things and see what she can do with it going forward. Okay, one more.
Better.
We're going to skip the next part.
Network, free lunch, and meet Todd Stevens.
Okay. That's not bad. That's not bad.
Hope it runs smoothly and everybody gains something that they didn't know or, yeah, before they attended.
Well, you're already off to a good start. So far, so good. Well, thank you for that, too. So I knew there would be some scientists in the room, and I knew there'd be some engineers and some analyst types in the room. And I know this is an industry that survives on numbers. And so let me assure you, first is going to be a terrific day. But because this work is often science and numbers driven, I'm also going to try to make the case that there are going to be measurable results today. And I don't typically read a lot of my presentations, but I'm reading this one today because there's data. There's a lot of data, and since there is data, and I'm starting to believe data is one of the few things that really moves the needle when it comes to change and equity, I'm going to use a lot of data today. Let me also say, particularly for my friend here, the guys in the room, this is a day to learn and engage. And although we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about women, I am a wife of 35 years, I have 4 adult sons, and there will absolutely be no bashing, at least not from me. So I want the guys to keep your arms unfolded. We're not here to bash, we're here to learn. Okay? So let's start by taking a look at this team of young people. Back there, young lady. What do you see in this photo?
Trying to be politically correct with 3 white guys and some diverse women.
Okay. Blue shirt. Checkered.
That's me.
There you go.
A group of happy, engaged people who are working together.
There's an accent there.
Oh.
A lot of early career folks, just out of college, ready to go.
That's good. All good answers, honest answers, sincere answers, and accurate. So, and I see all the same thing. But let me just tell you what else I might see. Did the young man on the far right work his way through college? Maybe. Is the young age possible? Would any one of these people possibly bring some strength or talent to one of your teams? If you took the time to look at what's behind the smiling faces and the great outfits and learned a little more about their backgrounds. You see some collective intelligence going on maybe in that picture? So think about that. Here's what I suggest, and a lot of people suggest, diversity brings. First of all, just different experiences and perspectives. If I'm a first generation college student, a college graduate, imagine the kind of work ethic, imagine the kind of dedication, imagine the kind of commitment I might bring to my role on your team. If my parents had been in the business, and even though I look innocent and sort of like everybody else in the room, imagine the depth of experience that I have and that I bring to a team. So take a look at this list, because I'm going to quiz you on it later. But can everybody read it? I just want to make sure the folks in the back, can you read it as well? Need me to read it out loud? Diversity of experience brings diversity of perspective. The more varied the perspectives, the greater the outcomes. Underrepresentation of any group means fewer unique perspectives. There's a level of truth in debate and discussion, and diverse voices inspire creativity. Does that help? But let's assume for a minute creativity doesn't really matter. So let's go to the heart of the matter, and what matters to probably a lot of people in this room, certainly to your CEO. Gender and ethnic diversity, in my opinion, and the opinion of lots of people, grows the bottom line. But I don't want you to take my word for it, because I already told you I got lost on the way. And I'm not a science major by any stretch. But I did bring along with me, I'm going to use quite a bit of the research from McKinsey, for example, because numbers aren't my strong suit. I was a liberal arts major, and I can barely balance my checkbook. But really, I want to do a couple things this morning, and I am going to rely on some stats. And when we get to the end, if you've got questions about some of the citations, I'm happy to share them with you. But here's what I want to do this morning. I'm going to share my point of view on why diversity matters. I'm going to talk about the obstacles, and we're going to be real. You are real with me, sister, I'm going to be real with you. This is not easy. There are lots of challenges and obstacles in this work. It's why not many companies get it right. And I'm also, though, going to offer a path forward, but I want to also hear from you, and that's when I'm going to jump down and pretend I'm Oprah, because I want to hear from you about whether or not I'm being realistic about some of the expectations. Is that fair? I don't want you to leave here saying, man, that woman, she got lost and she's still lost. She's up in the clouds. No, I want to make this a discussion near the end and be sure that I'm, again, you don't have to take my word for it. I want you to tell me a little bit. But let's start here. The bottom line is the bottom line. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 15% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. So 15% more likely to do better than the average for their industry. Those in the bottom, for gender and for ethnic, are statistically less likely to achieve above average financial returns. So they are not just below the line, they're lagging behind those companies below the line. Now, we just talked about this. Creativity, ingenuity, collective intelligence, sort of all those things happen when you put a diverse group of people and people with diverse backgrounds in a room. And so it makes sense that if they're not in the room, you kind of got to do a lot of the stuff you've always done. Or you're going to have a group of people who all agree with you, who agree with each other on the way forward. Racial and ethnic diversity has a stronger impact on financial performance in the U.S. than gender diversity, perhaps because earlier efforts, and there have been efforts in this space for women for a while, to increase women's representation in the top levels of business have already received or yielded some positive results. Take a look at this one. And again, for those who can't see it, so it was a global survey. These are global companies, 2010, global companies, 279. Those with the greatest number of women on their executive committees earned a return on equity 47% higher than those with no female executive members. I'm not making this up. That's global. US. 222 US companies, and I'm pretty sure this is McKinsey's, these are McKinsey's numbers. There was a correlation between diversity at the executive level and not just profit, but value creation. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 27% more likely to outperform their national industry average. And I repeated that for a reason. So if you care about nothing else but your bonuses, I think I'm making a case here, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you care about more than your bonuses, you know, we've got, I thought I turned that off. We've got some other things to talk about. So, I'm thinking about you, Margita. Why does it matter? I'll walk through the list. Minimize the likelihood of PR missteps, enhance job satisfaction and retention, successfully launch more new products, perform better at complex problem solving, deepen and broaden community impact and credibility, and grow the bottom line. And I'm assuming some of you still aren't convinced. These are challenging times. I'm sure you read the news, and I'm sure you've seen some major brands get in some major hot water for bad behavior on the part of their employees. Safeway, just last week, Papa John's, chairman resigned, Applebee's, CVS, Nordstrom, and of course Starbucks. Now, in most of these cases, in fact, probably in all of these cases, stock prices bounce back. They're all still going to get their bonuses, but I don't think the CEOs or the senior leaders or the stockholders of those companies are necessarily seeking that kind of publicity and notoriety. What do you think? No. We can talk about new products. I know there are a lot of engineers in the room. And geologists. Again, I'm frightened. But I'm going to say if you had a group that looked more like that team we showed at the beginning, again, with those diverse perspectives and experiences, might you solve complex problems more thoroughly, better than the competition? Let me stop here. Anybody disagree? I've got fewer arms folded. I got a hand on the chin, under the chin over here. Stand up. I'm gonna pick on you. Come on.
I'm thinking it through. I don't know.
I don't expect you to go. Yeah. Tell me what you're thinking
I'm
about.
just trying to challenge these ideas. I'm not against it, but in my mind, I'm just.
You're processing it.
Yeah.
Because well, you tell me if I'm wrong. Are you processing the profitability question?
Kinda, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
looking at, when you talk about diversity, at the same time I'm thinking about some homogeneous cultures where, like if you take, for example, Japan, and if you look at the culture, they're very homogeneous, and you look at the corporate companies in Japan, they're very successful. So, I mean, it's just one case, of course, but.
Well, and if we were operating in Japan, in addition to being living and working in one of the most diverse states in the nation itself is starting to become more diverse. I will say, from my perspective, where I am most convinced, to be really honest about it, is where generations start to come in and bring new ideas. I'm a proponent, obviously, of gender diversity. I'm a proponent, obviously, of ethnic diversity. But I think bringing young people into a team, and maybe I feel this way now because I've got 4 adult children who all need to work, so I don't have to pay for anything. But I think I'm starting to feel that way because I do think young people bring a perspective that I don't have. Now, I know I look 35. But I have a son who's 29. So, yeah, but you see what I mean? I'm with you, and I understand why you might say I need to process it. I'm going to throw a lot at you today, and I want you to do just that. And I want you at lunchtime and when you get back to your offices to challenge each other, but keep an open mind. And again, I think you're spot on. If we were in Japan, we'd be good. Because pretty much everybody in the room and most of our customers would look the same. Thank you for that. Tell me your name.
Orhan.
Thank you. I'm very proud of him. He's going to be my new best friend. Other than Rakita. So, I'm sure the scientists will appreciate this line. It's not rocket science. No, it's harder. It really is. I mean, this conversation and this exchange that we just had is the kind of conversation you've got to have in every department and at every line of operation, and it's really hard. And some people will come to the table open-minded and willing to say, I'm going to process it. And some people are going to come to the table and say, I don't buy it. So that dynamic in and of itself makes this conversation and makes equity more difficult. But there are other things that makes it difficult. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we haven't made enough progress. I'm going to talk about pipeline, I'm going to talk about lack of promotion. I'm going to talk about the domestic burden that a lot of women have. And I'm going to spend a few minutes on unconscious bias because I have to, okay? So women make up a little more than 50% of the population. And at US companies, women comprise about 44% of the workforce. But women account for only about 16% of members of executive teams. And so if we're 16% of executive teams moving into those higher ranks and moving into that COO, that CFO, that CEO job is going to be a challenge. Only 6% of US companies are run by women. In fact, we had a very significant retirement announced this week with the CEO of Pepsi. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say she's probably not going to be replaced by another woman. So we're at 6%. Think about this one though. Again, McKinsey 2017. 222 US companies employ about 12 million people. 222 US companies employ about 12 million people. Women held only 225 of the senior vice president roles. Again, how do you start to broaden those opportunities for women to go into the C-suite? Now, some industries, technology in particular, are particularly poor at hiring women in the first place. They have really struggled. But in a lot of industries, and I wonder if this is the case here, I'm not sure, women tend to get stuck in that middle manager, sort of right in the middle, and they stay there. So I want to talk a little bit about promotion as well. First of all, getting on that first management rung is really, really challenging. So we'll hire. We'll go out and say, let's bring them all in. But women who come in at the entry level and then want to make that first leap to manager are 18% less likely, 18% less likely to receive promotions than their male counterparts. Again, McKinsey. Now, some will say, and I have heard this in my career, that that's because women don't have the same degree of ambition as men. And I bet there's some men and some women in this room who've bought into that. Wrong. Great majority, 79% of mid and senior level women were more than interested in reaching a top management position, pretty much the same proportion as men. About 74% of women in another study, and about 80% of men eager to be promoted to the next level. So it's not because we're not desiring to move on. Something else has happened. And that said, women are less confident of fulfilling their ambitions, and I think it's justifiable. Men are more likely to receive promotions, even though women and men ask for promotions at roughly the same rate. Let's talk about the domestic burden, says the woman who raised 4 sons. Now, the last time this kind of detail on employment data was collected was 2014, so work with me a little bit. But about 64% of mothers with children under 6, so 64% of women who had children under 6 were employed or actively looking for work. I'm going to guess that number's a little bit higher now. You all know this, but McKinsey started some of this research in 2007. It has continued to 2017, and it's been pretty consistent. More than half of the women surveyed who work full-time do most or all of the household work. Okay, now I said I wasn't going to bash any men. Okay, no, I won't. Women with children and partners, but you know who you are. Women with children and partners are 5.5 times more likely to do all or most of the household work than are men in the same family situation. Again, you know who you are. Now that's not to say that men don't contribute. My husband did. He was awesome. But if the great majority of women bear the responsibility for the domestic responsibilities at home, then imagine why and really home management, then imagine why we're challenged in the workplace in terms of gaining equity. So I want to talk about unconscious bias, and I'm going to tell you now that I do a lot of, just in the last couple of years, I have done a lot of training in this area. And most of our trainings are 2, 3, 4, 8, or 16 hours. I'm going to give you this training in about 5 minutes. So bear with me, but I want you to have a little bit of an understanding of it. How many have heard the term before? Or implicit bias. I sort of use the terms interchangeably. Has anyone ever taken the Harvard Implicit Association test? Anybody? You don't. Then you guys over you. Love him. The term was thrown around a lot in 2016 for a variety of reasons, and I'll just say that I think there are still people who could use the training. So what I like to say is that we're all being had by our brains. Now, I know you can't see this because I can barely see it, but that's a brain, which a lot of big ones in this room. So the human brain can take in 11 million bits of information at any one moment. We're only consciously aware of maybe 40 of those bits. Now let me give you an example. Margita just reached for a piece of paper and put it in front of her and started to look at it. All using her brain, leveraging that big brain of hers.
Still paying attention.
Oh no, I'm not worried about that. I ain't worried about that. You got this, sister. But all unconsciously. Someone just put their glasses on. Someone scratched their nose. You're rocking your foot. All of those things, it's fine, keep rocking. All of those things require, you guys know this, you're scientists. I'm the liberal arts major, come on. All of it requires your brain. So much of it, though, you do without even being conscious of it. And what scientists now say is about 2% of emotional cognition is available to us at any given moment. And that racial bias and other kinds of biases tend to reside in those networks. Now let me stop here. And let me make this clear if you remember nothing else that I said today. Bias is not the same thing as racism. Bias is not the same thing as sexism. Bias is not the same thing as ageism. Bias has nothing to do with isms. Bias is bias. I, as an African American female, am as biased as my buddy over there who doesn't have his arms folded anymore. We are all biased. We all have brains that work the same way. And I like to say that because I want everybody to relax. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. We all have these biases. So, how many of you is even old enough to remember a file cabinet? See, some aren't. Some are like, a file cabinet? I use my phone. So, let me tell you what the slide says, again, for those who can't see it. The subconscious makes sense of what we perceive by filling in gaps, sorting into categories, creating associations. Together, these processes create shortcuts which become habits. So what I like to say to folks is think of your brain as a file cabinet. You pull the drawer out, and over time, you see a name, you see a subject, you pop the paper into that particular file. And you do it automatically. You don't even think about it. If I see Redmond, I put it in the Redmond file. If I see oil industry, I put it in the oil industry file. If I see CRC, I just start to put things into files automatically. And what science tells us is that's exactly what the brain does. I want you to read this with me, out loud.
Only smart people can read this, could not believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind and ability to understand.
Got that one? Now one more, this is really hard, but I know I have some really smart people in the room. I'm going to put up a picture and I want you to just quietly, now this is a competition. 14, genius. 13, 12. 12?
Yes.
11? Good. 10? 9? How about fewer? Fewer than that? All right. There are no triangles. Why are there no triangles? Scientists. Because a triangle is 3 lines connected together. I also like to trick people and say, and I can't do it in this room because it's not as clear, but most people even see the triangle, the one triangle being brighter than the other. Do you see that?
Yes.
Absolutely not the case. Why? Because we fill in gaps. We use our brain to just essentially perceive and fill in gaps, oftentimes based on what we've been instructed to do. Now, if I had said to you, look at this really hard and tell me if you see triangles or not. Again, liberal arts major, room full of scientists. The scientists in the room would have said, oh no, Cassandra, there are no triangles. But I gave you a very specific instruction. And then, even better, I got your competitive juices going. And all you did was focus on what I asked you to focus on. And you filled in gaps based on perception, based on experience, based on associations. And so I'm just going to say to you, back to my friend, say you came from Japan, or you moved to Japan. And I'm not asking you to answer that question, but I want you to think about that. That's how implicit or unconscious bias works. So what does this mean? We all, and again, this is an 8-hour training that we did in 5 slides, but I got you on the triangles. I'm really proud of myself. But we all have implicit bias that can affect our behaviors and understanding. And because these attitudes that are unrecognizable or unrecognized, but powerful, they influence our choices and decisions. And so you've probably heard about bias around hiring. We've been talking about bias around promotion. Bias is also, I'm going to talk about this more than once, bias inside the workplace often doesn't necessarily work against people. Oftentimes it works for people. So if I'm a part of a group that's pretty homogeneous, and I sort of feel comfortable with that group, am I more likely to hire someone more like me? Or am I unconsciously, or maybe consciously, going to lean towards someone who has had a shared experience that I've had? That's how it works in the workplace, okay? Can we undo them? And the short answer is no. But I asked you about the Harvard test, which I really would encourage, particularly those of you who are in a position to do any kind of hiring or to pull people into teams. I strongly encourage you to go onto the Harvard website and just take a handful of the test. You never have to tell me, your mother, your spouse, Margita, your CEO, where your biases lie. You can keep them to yourself. But if you know what they are and where they are, you are more likely to be more thoughtful when you're in the presence of people where you've got biases and where your biases lie. And you're possibly going to be more thoughtful about just process, procedure, hiring, who you include on your teams, and those kinds of things. So think about taking the IETs. There's a wonderful set of vignettes on the New York Times website. It's just called Who, ? Me, ? Bias. Again, about 3 or 4 minutes each. They're really well done. I'm happy to share both of these resources with the steering committee, so if you want to get some of that information out to folks, they're really great. But you've got to remember that, again, this is not rocket science. This is harder. And we're talking about changing behaviors and attitudes and associations and biases that most of us have lived with all our lives. It doesn't make us bad people. No isms here. It just makes us biased. And you got to deal with them. Because once you know what they are, and once you sort of expose yourself to groups that you do have biases against, and expand your associations, you're better off. And so, again, I'd love to see some of you have an opportunity to use those two tools. Okay. Who loves a good symphony? I do. I really do. And I have this wonderful picture up because I just want to make sure that those of you, okay, wait, let me go back. Who believes me? Is bias real? Just raise your hands. I'm not insulted. Anybody still on the fence? Any Doubting Thomases? Oh, come on. I am not that good. Okay, I am. I'll take it. No. I'm sure there are some, and I'm okay with that. But I want to give you one last example. So, beginning in 1970 and well into the 1990s, there was a 30% increase in the proportion of women among new hires and a 25% overall increase in the number of women in orchestras. Why do you think? Anybody know?
Blind auditions.
Blind auditions. Absolutely. So, orchestras started to use screens to conceal candidates from the jury during preliminary auditions. That increased the likelihood that a female musician would advance to the next round by 11 percentage points. During the final round, select women were selected by 30%, by a margin of 30% more. Now I have to tell you this vignette. I don't know if you knew this. Someone just told me. When they first started the blind process, they saw some difference, but not the numbers that they saw ultimately. Guess why? The women would wear heels. And the jury would hear the clacking of the heels on the wood and automatically know it was a woman. And still biases then went into work. So they started to have the women come in barefoot. In fact, they started to have everyone come in barefoot. Why? To equalize, normalize the playing field. And then they saw the difference. So again, don't take my word for it. I told you, I'm a liberal arts girl, but I got the data and I'm going to use it. It was a really, really significant change, and it's now standard operating procedure for most orchestras. So I'm going to stop. If CRC were an orchestra, if you were an orchestra as a company, what kinds of interventions, what kinds of blind screens, what kinds of blind auditions might you put in place to drive more equity inside the company? And that's not a rhetorical question. I want a couple of answers. Anybody got one or two? I'm going to pick on the steering committee now, because you guys know better. What do you think? Give me a blind audition opportunity.
Remove the names from resumes.
Say that again.
Remove names from resumes.
Remove names from resumes. Absolutely. Makes sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? What about colleges? I just heard somebody whisper that. I mean, we see Cal and we go crazy. But what if we see a CSU or a historically black college or university? Do we automatically, again, sometimes it's not bias against. In many cases, it's bias for. If it's a Cal grad, well, it's top notch and they'll certainly do great here. But will they look like one of the folks in the picture that we showed up front? And will they bring creativity to your teams? Possibly, probably. But are you cutting yourselves, are you cutting away opportunities to bring others in that might also add to the team? Does that make sense? Names is great. Colleges make sense. Anything else? Give me one more.
Ages.
Sorry?
Ages.
Age. Absolutely. And as I said to my, okay, you're my second best friend. As I said to my second best friend, I think that's where I'm definitely putting myself in this category, because even though I look, what did we say, 35? All together now, I look 35. I have the big one next year, and it's not 5, it's 6. And I know, go ahead, say, she looks really good. How does she do it? A lot of hair color. Thank God for science. But I know that I think for myself, and I know now, even when I pull together teams for projects, just my own client work, I am trying to be more mindful. I've been around for a while, I've been around the block, I know a few things. I work for some really cool people, I've had some great experiences, but there are young people that bring into the room, into my thinking, into my space, things that I haven't thought about. So you're absolutely right. You've got 3 things right there that you could change and make your auditions, if you will, more blind. And I hope you think about doing that. So, a little bit of a word to the wise. And again, it's not rocket science, it's harder. This is one of my favorite sayings. And it was Mom's Mabley. I know almost nobody in the room remembers who she is, but she was one of the first African-American female comedians. And she had this line where she said, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. Now, what does that mean? Anybody? Where am I engineers? Those people are supposed to be smart. Stand up. I saw your name. I saw your hand. What's that mean? Try new things to get new answers. Bingo. If you keep doing the same stuff and you're getting the same result, and you keep doing the same stuff, you're going to get the same result. Thank you. So, watch some of this. Number 1, we don't hold ourselves accountable to improve results. You have to manage diversity, and you have to, if it really is a priority, you have to treat that part of your operation the same way you treat drilling. You have to hold yourself to some standards. You have to set bars, and you have to put some resource behind them, and then you have to try to drive results. But most organizations won't hold themselves accountable. They'll put some good language in place, they'll do a few things around hiring, and they won't do much more. You've got to put structured systems into place. Again, this is just like any other operation. People are human. We will resort back to our old ways and get our old answers again unless we've got systems in place to drive new habits. This happens a lot too. Organizational efforts are inconsistent. Sometimes that's because you just have a turnover. You'll have that wonderful woman over in HR gets recruited someplace else. She takes a whole body of work and energy and effort to the new place, and the new guy comes in, and we have no systems, and so we're right back to square one. So again, you've got to have systems in place so that no matter who is responsible for driving diversity and driving equity, has a system, is being held accountable, there's a method to it. Would you retire and not leave in your wake some instructions for how we go out and drill? You would for me, because I would get lost, number 1. Acknowledge it. Again, we're not pointing fingers, we're not calling anybody out for being bad. We're just saying we're all biased, we've got some bias in our structures, and so we've got to be mindful of it. And again, this piece, if you remember nothing else, remember this. I know I gave you another one, but let me give you this one too. Oftentimes, it is not that I am working against someone. It's just that I like Margita. I know Margita. I've hung out with Margita. So I want her on my team. A young something that's not like me into the mix, I'm not getting anything different. Does that make sense? If there was a team of all, your job as would I, but you get what I'm saying. So every now and then, I might really want Margita on my team because I adore Margita. But Margita might not bring to my team a difference of opinion or a different set of experiences that makes sense to drive us forward. She might make sense on another team that also needs someone with our skill sets. So just remember that bias works against people oftentimes, but most of the time in organizations like this, there's a lot of bias for. There's a lot of in-group favoritism. There's a lot of, you're a lot like me, I like you, I like to hang out with you, I've got a great project, I'm gonna pull you in. Not as creative, I promise you. And then we talked about pipeline. It's just really, really, really important to take a look, and again, you're a room full of scientists for the most part, look at your data. Look at who's coming in the door, look at who's getting promoted, and look at who's getting promoted again, and look at who's getting promoted again. And then look at those special project teams, those special opportunities where someone gets to take something and shine, and then build their internal resume to get them to the next level, and who gets those opportunities. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Description and desired skills. Ask all candidates the same questions. I'm going to talk about that. And then where you can, use a diverse group of people to go through, to help you with some of the hiring processes. Think a little bit about this because it has happened to me. I think it's probably happened to some of you. Once you've got someone hired and they're in the door, the work has really just begun. Now, this happened to me. I mean, all of those things might seem like nothing to those of you who've been here for a long time, right? But if I'm entering this space and I am from, I'll just say a class or a group of people that hasn't really been around, an acronym in a meeting. Something that small early on would have made me feel more like, oh, I'm getting it. So managers and those who are responsible for teams, as you pull new people in, especially if they're not like everybody else here, but who hasn't been on your team before. Just be mindful of those things. Happens. Position comes open, or even before it comes open. This happens a lot. I'll just walk over to your cubicle and tap you on the shoulder and say, I got something going in my department and I just want to make sure that you get your credentials in before everybody else. Atta girl. But just watch that, watch clicks, watch those all boys gatherings or those cigar nights or those scotch nights or those golf days. This is what I do want to talk about. And this is really an area that's near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you why in a second. Sylvia Hewlett is an economist and founder of the Center for Talent Innovation. And when it comes to gender equity in the workplace, she says that women can become champions or sponsors or people who are essentially tying their brand to someone else's success. It's a big deal, but this relationship typically is what's needed for women to move from what she calls that sticky wicket of middle management into senior management.
So we're going to move on to our next section. We will have a 15-minute break. Please be back by 10:15. Remember, if you need your receipts for the donations, Stacy will be back here at this table, which I'm very excited about. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Shawn Andrews. I'm here at the Petroleum Club in Bakersfield, and I'm thrilled to be doing the keynote presentation this afternoon for CRC's first WIN conference. I will be speaking about my book, which is The Power of Perception, Leadership, Emotional Intelligence, and the Gender Divide. I hope you enjoy it, and see you soon. Thanks.
Get to do it.
super often. You know, we do it for the business conference, we do it for the Christmas party. But to get everyone here today to talk about diversity and inclusion today, I'm going to start off by asking them some questions. Full disclosure, they've been given the questions ahead of time. And then at the end, we're going to open it up to the audience, and we have some microphones. We're going to run around, and you guys can ask questions. Our discussion panel brings together people from various departments and diverse backgrounds around CRC. These CRC employees have leveraged their strengths and forged unique career paths. They're contributing to what CRC is today and are leading the way to our future success. Our panelists include Anibal Araya, leader for thermal operations, Casey Coddington, staff geologist for South Valley. You guys can like.
Okay.
Diane Corbett, director of crude marketing, Rick Garcia, manager, HSE projects, E.J. Jones, legal and securities advisor, Anna Montenegro, subsurface manager at Elk Hills, Raymond Rodriguez, Director of Environment, and Francisco Leon, Executive Vice President, Corporate Development and Strategic Planning. And challenges. Can you talk about your early career and why that was so important to you?
Well, first of all,
now it's working. Hello? Is this better? Okay, I don't want to make anybody deaf. It was important for several reasons. One of the things is that I like to learn as much as I can, as fast as I can. I don't know if some of you can relate about it. When I was a young engineer, I didn't want to wait 10 years to know everything that I need to know. Now I know that you need time for things to sit in. So my approach was like, I'm going to be involved in everything I can. I'm going to volunteer to anything I can, because the best way to learn is hands-on. So I volunteer for drilling, for completion, for going to offshore and staying for 2 weeks surrounded by wonderful males, and see all the operations with my own eyes and understand all the stuff that I was taught on the academy, on the university. They taught me a lot of wonderful things, and many of them I didn't get to experience live. And once I got to experience live, a lot of things may like click, like, oh, this is what they meant when they said this. And then I got to learn things that they don't teach us. I mean, they teach us stuff that comes in the books, they give you all the data, and everything is perfect. You just need to get used to your logic and practice to find the solution. But then you get problems. And when the problems come, somebody with experience that have faced those problems before have an approach on how are we going to solve this? How are we going to QC this tool? How are we going to get through this situation? And that was some added knowledge and experience that was not part of what I wanted to do, but it came through me. The other thing that I learned is that by volunteer to things that nobody else wanted to do because you want to preserve your weekend or your nights, or you don't want to be away for so long, is that you meet people with different backgrounds, with different levels of experience, and they are also enriching. And somehow you connect or you create a new network where now you have a better communication with all the disciplines. I was in one department, but I was able to interact with multiplicity of departments because I was volunteer for different things. So it was, I guess that I wanted to do as much and learn as much as possible very fast. But on the process, I got to learn other things too. So very positive.
EJ, can you explain your current role in the company and talk a little bit about how you've made it your own?
Sure. I'm going to stand because I have a little more to say.
So good morning. It is a pleasure to be here at the CRC WIN conference today. My role at the company, I'm a legal and security advisor, and my responsibility is I file regulatory documents for the company. So documents like the 8K for the earnings release, the Section 16 and the EDGAR on Security and Exchange, the Statement of Information, annual reports, so the company can do business in California and in Delaware. I also maintain like the minute books. I prepare written consents. I gather signatures. I notarize signatures. I support the in-house counsel, outside counsel. So basically, jack of all trades. And what was the second question? Oh, here it is 3 years later, and look what we've accomplished. So he took it to the senior management, and they approved it. And now I've saved the legal department money on the budget. I've cut costs from working with outside counsel, because now I kind of do more of what we would pay paralegal at a law firm to do, and then cuts costs down hundreds, thousands of dollars. And now my title, I'm a legal and securities advisor, and I think I'm doing a good job.
Diane, when I first met you and heard you talk about what you do, I thought, this is one tough lady. Can you talk about your role and some of the skills that are required?
Well, first of all, with an introduction like that, I had to Google what she meant by tough, perhaps, and the first definition was a rough, violent gangster. The second was tenacious with an ability to cope with adverse conditions. So I think I'm going to go with the second one. Thanks, Melissa and the committee, for the opportunity to be here. So I sell, my team sells CRC's crude oil, and we're called crude marketing, but that may be a little misleading. It's not a advertising type marketing. It's truly selling. It's a classic selling. I think you would call it a business-to-business technical sales, if I had to describe what we do, to outside. And what does that mean? That means that, like any sale, you go out and you find the customer that's gonna give you the best terms, usually price, but that would also include, am I getting a lot of feedback here? Is it on? Yeah, okay, good. So finding the best customer is not, when people think of selling, I think they think maybe it's just a lot of talking and smooth talking. It's really not that. They have different logistics, which pipeline it goes into, etc. So you understand the customer, you develop a rapport. We do this by phone, by email, a lot of face-to-face visits to Houston, to San Antonio, to Bakersfield. And it's how you work with that customer, a lot of respect, and carrying your message with ethics and integrity is part of it. So we know our customers, we know our products, we know our competition, and how our offering fits in with the competitive product, which is a cargo from anywhere around the world in the relative economics. And then we negotiate with the customer, trying to achieve the best thing. We're trying to get the highest price, they're trying to get the lowest price for this crude. So we go through that process, and then we ultimately contract and then deliver on that contract, making sure the product moves in the manner that it is committed to. So that's what we do, and thank you, and hopefully I answered your question.
Thanks, Diane. Casey, you have a military background, and now you're a geologist. Can you connect those dots for us and talk a little bit about your career path?
I'll try. I don't think they really connect that well. So when I was 17, I graduated from high school, and I went to college to be a music major. So music performance major at that. So I was pretty talented. I wasn't phenomenally talented. I wasn't going to go to Juilliard or any conservatories. I was just good for that really small corner of southeastern New Mexico. So I went home for Christmas one semester end, and my dad invited the Army recruiter over. And he didn't do it for me, he did it because I have 2 knucklehead brothers. And he was like, please take them and do something with them. And I was like, well, I'm interested. I was really unhappy being a music major. I was like, I'm going to graduate and be homeless. So I was like, I have to do something else with my life, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I joined the Army. I was in the Army for 4 years. I deployed to Iraq for 15 months. And while I was in Iraq, I had a really supportive platoon sergeant. And he said, you know what, like, a lot of people belong here and this is great for them. He's like, you don't really belong here. He's like, you need to be doing something else with your life. Like, you're capable of more. So I was taking online classes. The Army's really supportive of, you know, improving your education. So I took a geology class, and I've always loved science, but I was like, this is really cool. So I took that class, kind of decided then that I was gonna get out of the Army. I got out of the Army, got pregnant with my daughter, and went to school for geology, and now I'm here.
And was there something about a cup of coffee?
Oh yeah, so I was at a student expo at OU, and I wasn't really looking for a job, but they were offering jobs. So I went, and there's like, if you've ever been there, there's a little coffee shop in the geology building. And it's the same old lady that's worked there, because I went 4 different years and she was there like 4 different times. And she was like, I was just like, hey, can I get a cup of coffee? And she's like, you have to try this Shamrock coffee. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm not interested in that, but she pushed it really hard and I bought it. So I get in the elevator and there's a guy there and he takes a drink of his coffee and he's like, oh, this is awful. And I was like, yeah, it's terrible. And he's like, she got you too, huh? And he's like, so what are you here for? And it turned out to be the Oxy recruiter, and he was recruiting geologists. So we just started talking. We moved on from the cup of coffee to talking about what sound different weapons make when you fire them, to talking about basketball in the Sweet 16. So yeah, that's how I'm here.
And just to add a little more color to that story, I then got a phone call from the Oxy recruiter who said, I have the perfect summer intern for you. All right, thanks, Casey. Anibal, you started your career with Halliburton, and while you were there, you developed some expertise that helped you differentiate yourself. Please talk about that and any advice to our audience on leveraging your strengths.
Okay, good morning. So 18 years ago, you're correct, 18 years ago, I got out of school with a petroleum engineering degree and joined Big Red, Halliburton. And while I joined Halliburton, what I did is I did cementing, sand control, pretty much everything that you learned at school, but did it hands-on. So that was kind of like my master thesis project, I guess, after school for 5 years, 4.5 years. And while I was there, what I did was I really focused on one of the service lines, which was production enhancement, better known as fracking, or frac, which is a bad 4-letter word in California now, right? So I won't say it again after this. Anyway, and I became very, very good at that. And my direction was to become the best fracker for Halliburton in the West Coast. Within Halliburton, I took assignments out, in Venezuela. I went to Texas. I took all the. Well, I'm nervous in front of all these ladies. I took all these opportunities that I could take, that were offered to me, and with that, my reputation with that specific, product line got well known, and that's what helped me within Oxy when I joined Oxy. Afterwards, it's exactly that. So, I guess what I could advise is pick a process or a skill set or craft, whatever you want to call it, become very, very good at it, because what that'll do, that'll give you the opening doors to anything. So become good at something within what you do. Once you've mastered that, it'll give you the exposure that you need to, for people to see what you can do in other places. So, because if somebody thought that you were good for that position, it's because of that skill set, that first part that you've mastered. Obviously, they know that you're good at that function, at that process, at that craft. So you'll be able to excel at that job, but then it'll give you an opportunity to demonstrate your skills in other aspects of whatever is that next job they give you. So always say yes Don't ever turn down anything. I mean, there's conditions that are gonna, prevent you from doing that, family and other stuff. I'm not saying, just completely ignore that. But always, don't think, this is a bad job, and it's not the job that you want, because you will always find an opportunity on that job that's being offered to you. Because whoever's offering that job obviously thinks a lot of you, and they think that you're the right person for that job. And then the third thing that I would advise is, we all need a little bit of luck, right? But if you've mastered the other two and stick to those two, when luck comes, you'll be able to take that opportunity and win from that. So that's it.
Great. Francisco, thank you for being with us. How did you put your strengths to work to get to where you are? And particularly, can you talk about the importance of being prepared when opportunities come along?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. I would say very similar to what Aníbal described. It's about, there's really no shortcuts. It's about just working hard and being prepared. But one of the things that really struck me earlier in my career was, I was in Oxy business development, and people would get promoted into different levels, and I would hear people say, oh, now I don't have to do financial models because I now made it to this great position and I can lead my minions of people to do the work for me. And that always really confused me, because I felt like you have to always work at your craft. So as Aníbal was saying, be good at something, but keep working, right? You can't stop and say, I made it and I can't work, I can't learn something new. And that's been something that I carry with me. In every role, I try to learn something. And similar to Aníbal is the saying yes. Sometimes it's difficult. And there's two instances when I look back when I think some people would have made a different decision. First, I was in investment banking in Houston, and I was invited to come work with Oxy, and I took a pretty significant pay cut, right? And it was you think you're a big shot because you're an investment banker, you're kind of top of the world doing financial transactions. And to come to Oxy, it required coming to an industry job that didn't have the same pay structure. But I saw the potential and the benefit of coming to a company that was successful, and I wanted to learn. So I made the move, and I started as a senior analyst in the Houston office. I felt really good the first week I got there, because I got invited to go to Suriname, a city called Paramaribo, to do my first international deal. And I was like, wow, this transition really worked for me. The reality is, now I learned after the fact, the only reason I got invited is because they needed one more person to go in the corporate jet. It was a minimum of 12 people, and I was number 12. So good old Oxy days. But in the second instance, which is more relevant to where I am today, I again was in business development, working with Todd in Oxy, and again I thought I made it to the. I'd never really been thinking about where the next level was going to be, but I really liked my job, and thought I was doing a lot of great things for the company. And he calls me into his office and he says, come on in, I want to have some news for you. I said, okay, great. And he said, you're moving to Bakersfield to team planning. And I really thought, I really upset him. I don't know why, but please forgive me, right? And it was a lateral move, but it was anyone that I would talk to, friends and family, saw it as a step backwards. And to me, it felt like a step backward at the time, but I trusted Todd. He's always looked out for me. And I put my best effort forward. And it's something I didn't know. I didn't know the planning side. I didn't know the California operations. And I moved here for a couple of years, and really, that was probably one of those fork in the road decisions that got me to where I am today. Without that move, I wouldn't have been able to build the insights that helped me today to make decisions around the financial aspects of the business. So,
well, surprisingly enough, I had a very similar experience like Casey had. I came home my junior year, well actually I was in junior high school. I love that stuff, I want that. And so the Navy recruiters started talking to me, well, you can be this electrician guy, and you can use this, and you go to the academy, and you can do all this stuff. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I signed up, and I just forgot about it and went about my life. And then it wasn't until my senior year when I graduated where my mom reminded me, hey, you're going into the Navy, aren't you? I was like, oh, yeah, I am. So it was, after I graduated, I went straight into the Navy boot camp. And for me, that was a life-changing, because hats off to those military people that could be in for 20 years. That is a tough career. That is a tough career. For me, all the time I was in there, so I was figuring out how I can get out. But what I found is it was just an area where I can practice and learn, because I was often put in leadership positions where I was just, okay, let's do this, and oh wow, that worked. And so I was able to practice the craft of being a leader, or practice something I didn't even know how to do or thought about. And believe me, you're in the in the military, you are surrounded by a diverse amount of people. In boot camp, I was one of 75 people that knew how to swim. So being from California, there's a diversified amount of people in boot camp. So when you're in the service, you have that culture of differences and personalities that you have to learn and understand, and how to communicate differently, completely different ways. That's when I actually served at commands with women, and I was thinking, well, it's mostly just men, but no, it was women as well. And I also learned a valuable lesson about the chain of command and leadership, and respecting authority, and understanding the value of sponsorship. We talked about that. One of my earliest commands, I was just 18, 19-year-old kid. I had broke my leg, I fractured my right femur, so I was working on Coronado Island, had a nice apartment in Coronado Island. I was a fireman there, but I worked for Vice Admiral Service and Vice Admiral Easterling. So I was just, those were my mentors and my sponsors. So when I was promoted, it was the Vice Admiral said, no, Raymond deserves that. Well, Fireman Rodriguez deserves that. Give him a promotion. So it was just because of that relationship and that work ethic that I saw them and that I was exposed to, that just helped me, and it gave me that little understanding. So moving forward, when I rolled out of the Navy, I was still kind of looking at, what am I going to do with my life? And I remember watching a Star Trek movie, or Captain Kirk went in this room, and the doors went shh, and I saw environmental engineering. Like, wow, okay, I'm going to be an environmental engineer. and so this college thing, I had a friend, he goes, no, you fill out these applications and you submit them, because we didn't have internet then. So we mailed in applications, and that's how I got, being military, you actually get into the schools you apply for at that time. So I got in Cal Poly in their environmental engineering program. And then I realized quite quickly, this stuff is expensive. And so I was fortunate enough to get a summer internship for Bechtel Petroleum at Elk Hills. And they were paying $10.50 an hour out there. And so I was living high. I was making $3,000 a year. And so I was able to work my way through school. But that's where I first got my taste of what this petroleum industry was all about and what they do. I worked with some great geologists. I worked as a petroleum engineer. I went on squeeze jobs, acid jobs, as well as cement jobs. I worked with the HSE, Jesse Pino, Mike, a lot of and that's how I start. And my understanding of what it's like to be in that diverse culture in the military really helped me thrive when it came to getting back to oil and gas. It was a long trip. I experienced it there, then I went away because I did consulting
back in 1972 and taught for 8 years. So teaching was really invaluable to my career in the oil field. You might not see a connect there, but there's definitely a connect. When you're teaching, you have to be a good mentor. You have to be able to communicate to a variety of audiences. You definitely have to know how to deal with the public. I mean, you have your students, you have your administration, you have your school board, and then you also have your parents that you have to deal with. So you learn some very invaluable things from a teaching position. But anyway, I think one of the most important things you learn is community involvement. I didn't really know I was doing it when I was teaching, but when you're a teacher, you naturally get involved with other things. I got involved with the recreation department. I became a coach. I coached 3 sports a year. Dealing with the parents there on a different level was something that really helped me. And then getting involved with the church in the town that I was with, another way to connect with the community. But I think that in itself was probably the biggest thing I got out of teaching that's helped me move on to the oil fields. But in those days, a teacher made $14,000 a year. That was my salary when I left teaching. I had my first child at the time, so I thought maybe it's time to make a little financial change here. I'll try the oil fields for a little while. I had experience in the oil fields because I always worked summers working through college. I worked my way through college working in the oil fields, so I have to thank the oil fields for that. So I said, I'm going to give the oil fields a little try and then go back and I'll get a high school position teaching biology. Well, that little stint at Unical turned into several years up to this point. But that kind of led into another kind of unique experience for me. When I went to work for Unical, I started as a roustabout. And so for 4 years, I worked roustabout, well puller, steam mechanic. I worked on steam generators. And then a production technician job came open through operations, and I took it. And that's when I started working on H2S scrubbers, SO2 scrubbers, corrosion control, things like that. And at this time, we had no HSE folks in the field. Unical at the time had a couple of HSE people, corporate, down in Los Angeles, and every once in a while they'd make a visit up here. So anyway, that production technician job kind of evolved into working HSE issues, working with the APCD, etc. And when they decided they needed a guy to fill that permanently, I guess I was the logical choice. That was my start in the HSE field back in 1984. And it was so different in those days. Like I say, I was a one-man show. So as we went on and we needed to expand the department, I was the logical choice to be the supervisor of that, and that's how I got into a management position at a relatively early age. So
That's great.
That's kind of my story.
Thanks. Francisco, over half your team is from outside the U.S., and you also have a high percentage of female leaders on your teams. How does that diversity contribute to your team's success, and why is diversity important overall for CRC?
Yeah, my teams are officially the United Nations of the company. Most of us quite a few of us are foreign born. I was born in Mexico. And diversity is just incredible. And I think we heard from our prior speaker, a lot of research is going into understanding diversity and the impact it has in the workplace. And I just find it fascinating that companies that have diverse workforces do better financially. And there's some correlation there that we're trying to understand, but I can see it in our company every day. I have, as Melissa said, I have females in top positions within my groups. So a lot of them are here today, and they do a tremendous job, but it's really that diversity, and not only male, female, but it's diversity of experiences, of thought that really enrich the discussions. We were faced with a lot of complex problems and issues with the company. My teams buy and sell assets. We look at joint ventures. We look at future planning for the company. We look at the reserves and the assets that we have. We have new energy. We have water initiatives. I mean, it's a pretty broad spectrum of things we cover, and we're trying to find solutions and improvements on the company. And without the diversity, without the team, it just doesn't work. And I find challenged every day by new ideas, by ways to innovate that come from the team. So definitely, being standing here with my type of background, never grew up thinking about the oil industry. In Mexico, it's not something you ever thought about being a petroleum engineer. I was always amazed when I lived in Texas, where most of my friends, their grandfather was in the oil field in Midland, and they kind of always known that that was their career path, which is great. And we find some people in Bakersfield the same way. For me, it was kind of a light career. Just kind of happened to fall into the industry, and I fell in love with it. As all of you know, but look around the room, look at our teams, the composition of our teams. We're a great, it's a reflection of the community we live in, right? So we need to be proud about the diversity that we bring. We need to continue making good choices of promoting people. But I see it every day. I think every day I'm just amazed by the contributions that the team can do, and it's a lot in law parts because of their experiences and their diversity.
Style.
Yes, I do.
As a leader, how do you ensure that everyone on your team is heard?
That's number one, right? So if I know that, I can be at times more direct, I won't overbearing. Personality of the individuals, that's not enough. So what I tend to do is I tend to call specifically and have them, come into the conversation. And then when those individuals come out, make sure that take in their input, advice, commentary, so that they feel safe. And then the next time around, they'll feel a little bit more comfortable to come out. And then we'd have to do a little bit less of the pulling, and it's just come out naturally. So it all starts with being self-aware, though, and understanding, what is your communication style and how that other people perceive that, not just how you are sitting in your own world, right? So that's how I do it.
You put the effort and you give time to things to work for you. I will agree with Aníbal that sometimes you need opportunity and a little bit of luck, but you need to put your effort and you need to give it time. I think there is an old saying, I don't know if the right translation is that Rome wasn't built in a day. And this applies to all of us, I think. In my country, I have already a set mind of I was going to retire in this company, I'm going to build my way up. I now have worked in all the departments and I know everything, but I'm a young career engineer. So I put myself into a plan, which means I have to get out of my country, and I work towards that. I was lucky enough that I got a scholarship, I went abroad, I got into OTSI, and something that it was like the end of the world for me because I suddenly lost my job in my country. I wasn't gonna be close to my family and all of blah 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 stuff that were important for me. And it turns into something really positive. I improved my English, I went to Europe, I work in the United Kingdom, in US, in Oman, in Venezuela. I have traveled for vacations to a lot of places. I can support my family. I have met a lot of wonderful people, and I have been exposed to a diversity of operations around the world that have enriched my career, and also to a lot of personal experience that have enriched my personal life. So it's like something that was supposed to be bad, it turned into something that was good, because things always get better if you put an effort and you give it time.
Thank you. I have a speech. At the precious age of 17, I was set free. I was emancipated. Chains came off. So I was set out into this big world to live, to survive. Plus a child path, right? So at this time, you're just working, just to get the bills paid, just to keep food on the table. So I'm working at a CPA firm as administrative assistant, and there was a paralegal, bankruptcy paralegal, that was leaving the firm. So one of the partners said, hey, I think EJ will be good at what Crystal does, taking over the bankruptcy responsibility. So I said, okay, I'll do this. So I take the role on, I'm in the role for about a year, The company hires a bankruptcy guru. This trustee is going to come in. She's going to take the bankruptcy department to another level. So she assessed each one in her department. When she gets to me, she said, EJ, so how long have you been a certified paralegal? And I said, well, actually, I'm not a paralegal. I just take over the responsibilities the partner asked me to do. Oh, okay. So 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the HR department. They want me to come in and talk to them. They said, well, EJ, we're a CPA firm. We have billable clients. We have billable hours. And since you're not a certified paralegal, if our clients find out that you're not a certified paralegal and you've been billing them hours, we can get in trouble, it can cause a mess. So we're gonna let you go. So I was like, wait a minute, you guys were the ones that came to me and asked me to take over these responsibilities. I said, well, invest in me, send me to school. No can do. So I walked out of that office that day with my brown cardboard box, you know, everything that you have on your desk. But I looked back and I said, you know what? I'm gonna find out how you can become a paralegal. What are the steps to become a paralegal? Because at that time, we didn't have the internet to that level where you could just do a search. So again, so I'm pretty sure I got back into another job as an admin. My son is about 6 years old at this time, so he's playing soccer. We're at a soccer game. So I'm sitting with some of the other moms, and one of the mothers starts talking, and she says, oh, I work for this law firm, and I'm a paralegal. And I said, oh, wait a minute, hold up, you're a paralegal? I said, how did you get started? So she said, I'm going to give you the phone number of who we call the paralegal queen. She's been a paralegal for like 30, 40 years at this time. So of course, I made the phone call to the paralegal queen, and you know, the rest is history. I've been a paralegal for the last 16 years, and it's just been a great career. And you talk about diversity firm at a company, but what Cassandra said earlier too, what I can bring to the table, sometimes it changes the whole game, because you may not have ever heard it the way I may talk. I may not talk like a graduate from Princeton, but I may bring
That's great.
We've heard a lot of that today, but you know, it's really hard when you're young to know what the heck you want to do in 5, 10, 20 years. But don't spend too much time analyzing it. Just start doing something to your next job from there. I love what I do, but I certainly didn't envision in high school or college that I was going to be selling oil, being an oil trader. But like I say, I've landed somehow where I absolutely love and feel I can contribute a lot. Started out as a math major, went in, got moved over to chemical engineering. I worked for major oil companies selling solvents and lubricants, and tried operations and planning. And when I got into the oil trading area, I said, okay, this is me. But like I said, there's no way you envision that. You just kind of go through the steps of the process and work as hard and impress as many people as you can as you go.
Good advice. Ray and Casey, what are some leadership skills that you developed serving the military that serve you well now at CRC?
I'll take your lead.
Okay. I guess this is going to stay here. So when I was 21, I got promoted to sergeant. And I became the supervisor of a whole bunch of my peers, and then a 41-year-old man who hated me and hated that I was 21 and I was his boss. So things that I had to do is just like learn how to build trust with people, to get them to, you know, believe that, one, I could do it, because I was 21 and I was young and I really didn't know what I was doing. And then two, to just like make sure I could like build those people. Like, hey, I know you're here now and you kind of want to be where I am, and you're kind of mad that I'm in this position and you aren't, but we're going to get there, you there too. So I think the biggest thing is just like getting them to trust you and believing in them.
Excellent.
I like how you said that, Casey, because there's a lot of examples like that when you're put in that position to where you're the 18, 19-year-old kid, and at that time I was promoted with what they call petty officer. So in my team, 19 and I had 30-year-olds, which I thought at the time were some old men. And, and so it is how do you motivate, how do you persuade somebody who's like, what are you gonna do, fire me? I'm enlisted, you can't fire me. There's nothing you can do to make me do what you want me to do. So it's developing those skills, how to motivate, and just how to communicate and how to get a common ground on what they're going to, and understand, hey, I'm here with you, we're on the same team, we got the same goal, let's work this together. There's no reason why we got to work against each other, because if we're all successful here, the mission's successful.
And really, all the organizations, all the organizations that I've worked for have given me, pretty much everything that I needed. They gave me training, good opportunities, a variety of experiences that I could use, and I really can't, think of anything else that I would have needed. But along those lines, I started out with an organization called UNICAL, Union 76. And in those days you thought, well, you get hired by a major, you're pretty much going to be with that major until you retire, was kind of the thought in those days in the early 80s. Well, that didn't come to fruition. I worked for UNICAL 16 years, and they decided they were going to exit California. At that time, it was a huge blow to everybody. Our company's selling. They're selling to this little company out of Texas. They have 5 employees. They're called Nuevo, and they're going to come out and they're taking over our properties. So kind of a shocker to everybody. But what you got to know is you've really got to adapt with change. You got to get over it. You can't dwell on it, and you can't try to control things that are out of your control. And I really saw this with a lot of people. They harbored a lot of resentment against the companies that were acquiring, and it wasn't good for them. It wasn't good for their careers, and it wasn't good for their interviews with the company that was acquiring. So we all have to be adaptable.
And what I'm gonna do. At the time, I have some good HR people that give me some stuff I have to do on my own. Talk to other people that were already on leadership roles and ask them, how did you do it? What did you do? What are your recommendations? And then find it out. And some people think that I am patient. Not really. How to interact with the team members, how to motivate them, understand them, guide them through the common goals. Communication is a big part of it. Into that coaching position and realizing that I am an enabler. Whoever said that, that's true. My position is to help people, and then how to develop those skills to help my team.
And also name a strength of why they're so successful.
Great question, Kim.
Since
We all want to hear that.
I'll keep it. And female engineers are, now they're going the other way, right? But they're actually end up being a lot more effective in a lot of the stuff that we do, believe it or not. So and what is that skill set you asked, right? That what is that in those individuals? And I have Brandy, and I have Jeanette, and I've worked with Mandy, and all these, and they all get that ball across the goal line. So I hate to go back to that, but they are results driven, and they focus on that. They focus on the price, and they're actually able to go to that, and I don't know what good way to say it, but that they're too focused on the final objective. But that's a lot of times seen from the outside. But I'll tell you that is the skill set, or the I don't know how to call it, the quality in the person that I believe makes a successful employee and a successful female employee within the organization. So.
Anyone else on the side of the room? I know you're all hungry. Lunch is coming. But
I'm not sure if everyone is utilizing that, but as a sponsor, that's something that you would look into.
This is something that I speak a lot. Nobody's really going to draw a path for you. Get a networking, networks, or do you want to get into the programming side? So HSC, right? All the other, if you want to call it.
And So it wasn't until I really got sponsorship, Jim Robinson, I think Sean Kearns, a few of the people that I admire and that I believe are the reasons why I'm in a leadership position, because I was passed over numerous times before.
In engineering and geoscience, it's going to be in all disciplines.
Yeah, we have that now. I know Rick Garcia.
Standing of the oil and gas industry. Both Mandy and Vanessa shared their journey that brought them to work in the fields that have been predominantly filled by men, and encouraged the girls to visualize and pursue a career in engineering. The tour was very successful and considered a win. With our group, not all is work, some of it is play. The group decided to have a hands-on working meeting and partnered with our CRC's Employees Activities Committee, Becca Champ. She put us on the calendar and we went to cook at the Ronald McDonald House. We took the challenge and cooked a delicious Italian pasta dinner for the hosted families. We proved to be great cooks. The event was also considered a win. The group received another great suggestion, this time made by Leslie Barnes, to reach out to a group, a nonprofit organization named Dress for Success. They were in need of support. Carolyn Fillmore and I took a small field trip and visited the site. There we met with Elaine McNerney, the founder and executive director of Dress for Success. Elaine had a long wish list that included black and white clothes and funds to help keep the doors open. Shauna Edmond, Jennifer Williams, and Stacy Martinez, who formed the conference charity group, have combined efforts and requested the black and white clothes and all the other items that you brought in today, so thank you very much. All of the items collected will be donated to Dress for Success. The boxes will be placed at various CRC locations for those that may wish to donate after today. If you forgot, if you left it at the doorstep, the boxes will be made available to you.
Joined a much larger organization of 133 affiliates in 16 countries. So we have work, Clinica Sierra Vista, MAOF, Garden Pathway, anybody who's doing job placement, helping a woman get a job. When they come to the door, we give them about a 20-minute orientation to an intensive career counseling session with our women. We try to meet them where they are, because a lot of these women have been through some stuff, and some of them are brand new.
I got to do something I hadn't done in a long time, and that was important to me.
If she has an interview, she gets one outfit. To have her have her Cinderella moment.
It's just a really overwhelming feeling.
I first walked in the doors of Dress for Success last year as a client into that third person out in the community. I didn't know how to, work and, be right in my right state of mind. So when I walked in the doors of Dress for Success, the ladies there, they welcomed me with like arms of just, just love, and they taught me how to love myself. I walked out of there feeling confident about myself. I walked out of there knowing that there is hope for me, of course, I was only a month and a half clean at that time. In January, I went through a program called MAOF, which is the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation, and they placed me at Dress for Success as an intern. My time there was almost done, and Elaine pulled me outside and asked me if I wanted to be hired, and it brought so much joy to my life. Today, through Dress for Success, I know how to love myself. I know how to walk with my head up, not knowing that I'm a failure, knowing that I'm not a failure. just, you know, it's so much hope, so much joy in my life now, thanks to Dress for Success. The women there, what Elaine does, it's amazing. It's a blessing, honestly. And like I said, I'm doing a custody I'm in a custody situation with my 5-year-old son. I just enrolled him in school yesterday. I'm trying to do everything that I can do as a mother, thanks to Dress for Success. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for having me. I'm really nervous. I'm like up here shaking. So, thank you for your guys' help, you know, and I hope you guys can help out with Dress for Success, because it's a very, gosh, it's like, it helps the women in the community. I get people in there, they come from Alliance family. I get people in there with welfare. They don't know which way to go, and it's easy for me to talk to them because I've been in their situation. I've been in the shoes that they're in, and if they come in there and they start crying or anything, I can just talk to them.
Part of our partnership with Dress for Success, we will actually be putting on a paint night fundraising event that will be held on Thursday, September 13th. It's diagonal to where our main building Y is at. There will be great food, folkloric dance, performers, and art. The paint night details that I wouldn't, register fast. So come on out, enjoy a night of fun, enjoy some food, some art, some entertainment, and help us make this event another win.
Any questions? Bring them up to us about the paint night or the Dress for Success story. Thank you so much to the ladies.
So the next speaker, she is a professional.
All right. Thank you, Astrid, and thank you to CRC for inviting me today. It's great to be here. I love first annual women's conferences because that is a beginning, right? It always starts with the first step, and then you never know what you can accomplish. So, we're going to talk about a lot today over the next 90 minutes. I'm going to share a lot of information with you. Hopefully your heads won't be spinning when you leave the room, but it's also going to be interactive, so you're going to play a part in this presentation, and hopefully it's engaging and fun as well. All right, so as Astrid mentioned, I'm talking about the power of perception. Now, why did I title my talk The Power of Perception? This topic is based on my doctoral dissertation. So when I started my program in 2010, the statistics around women in leadership were first coming out. And when I saw the data, I was shocked. Absolutely shocked, like most people are. But I was also intrigued about what was behind those numbers. Why is it that we have so many women in the middle getting experience, getting education, but we are not making it in large numbers to the leadership levels? So what I did is I studied all the barriers behind that. What keeps women from rising? In addition, I've always been fascinated by emotional intelligence. It's our people skills. So I wanted to know how that played into the perceptions of women and men in the workplace. So I studied that as well. So basically I put all three of these topics together, and to my surprise, there's tremendous overlap with all of them. Leadership alone is extensively studied. Gender alone, extensively studied. Emotional intelligence alone. But together, there's a lot of overlap between those. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Perception impacts promotion. That's the bottom line. The reason we have a leadership, I should say a global leadership gender gap, has nothing to do with women's skills, competencies, or knowledge. It has everything to do with our perceptions of women as leaders, as workers, as mothers, and as wives. It comes down to perception, and for many women, perception is reality, and it impacts promotion. So today we're going to talk about the leadership gender gap. I'm going to give you the latest statistics around that for your reference. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. We'll talk about the barriers to leadership that I mentioned. We'll talk about gender culture, which is a piece that you don't hear a lot about. But I find most people are really not only interested, but surprised at how gender differences show up every day at home and at work. And then finally, I'm going to give you lots of practical strategies today that you can walk away with. Does that sound good? Yes. Yeah? All right. In professional occupation, so this includes physician, attorney, so professional roles. Women make up just over half of all professional roles. As far as bachelor's degrees, women make up 60% of all bachelor's degrees in the US. That number has been pretty stable for now for a while. But what's also interesting is women also make up 60% of all bachelor's degrees in Europe also. So this is not just a US trend, this is a global trend. As far as board seats in the S&P 500, our largest organizations, women make up about a fifth, 21%. And the number that's really used as the main barometer for progress in leadership is the number of female CEOs. That number is currently at 5%. So you would think, given these other large numbers, women are in the workforce. They've been in the workforce, they have experience, they have education. There's a lot of women at entry level and there's a lot of women in the middle. But as you look up the ladder, we see less and less women. Now, what's discouraging about these numbers, that 5% has not budged in 30 years. 30 years we hover around 5% female CEOs. Last year it was up to 5.2, the year before that it was down to 4.7, so it fluctuates, but on average over a 30-year period it's about 5%. So, for those math majors in the room, and I heard during the panel there's a couple of math majors in here, 5% of 500 is 25. So there are 25 trailblazing women who are CEOs of S&P 500 companies. This is just a partial list for your reference. You've heard these names: Mary Barra at GM, Ginny Rometty at IBM, Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo, Adina Friedman at NASDAQ. So these women have been able to make it to the highest levels. Now, I have an image here from Greek mythology. Does anyone happen to know what this image is? I'm hearing whispers of it. Sisyphus. Yes, Sisyphus. All right, this is an educated audience, I can tell. Sisyphus. So in Greek mythology, Sisyphus was punished by having to push a boulder up a mountain, only to get it to the very top and have it roll back down again for eternity. So tasks that are both laborious and futile are referred to as Sisyphean. So there are days when I see women promoted into leadership roles and organizations initiating diversity and inclusion statistics, and I feel encouraged. And then I see the statistics. And I feel like we're starting all over again, and that boulder rolls right back down the hill. So the question is what we're doing futile? Is trying to reach gender parity in leadership futile? Can we make a change that impacts industry? Can we change the leadership ratios? Can we change how we envision a leader? The answer is yes, by one woman at a time. So every woman that advances in her career is a step up that mountain. So I my recommendation is it's not futile, it's worth it, and it's progress, and it's baby steps. Okay, so let's talk a bit about emotional intelligence. So you've all heard about emotional intelligence, right? It's your people skills, essentially. I use this analogy of an iceberg because this has been around a long time. You may have seen IQ at the top and EQ, or emotional intelligence, at the bottom. And the implication there is that we have our intellectual intelligence, but our people skills really drives our behavior. That part is true. What's not true is emotional intelligence isn't hidden and under the waterline. Emotional intelligence is visible every single day in our behaviors, and we see it every single day at work. So here's the formal definition. It's how we perceive and express ourselves. So it's a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how we express ourselves, how we develop and maintain our relationships, how we cope with challenges and make decisions, and finally, how we use that information to guide our thinking and action. So that's the formal definition of emotional intelligence. So I have a question for you. I mentioned this is going to be interactive. Let's see a show of hands. How many of you think men are more emotionally intelligent than women? It's okay, be honest. Be candid. All right, let's see a show of hands. How many of you think men are more emotionally intelligent than women? Not one person in the room. Not even the men? Okay. Now, I bet some of the men are scared because this is a male-dominated audience, but it's okay. It's okay. Does anyone think men are more emotionally intelligent? No. Okay. I have never had an audience where there wasn't one person, at least, who thought that. Okay. So how many of you think women are more emotionally intelligent than men? Let's see a show of hands. Okay, 100% of the room. You're all wrong. And millions of people who's taken emotional intelligence assessments worldwide, men and women are actually equally emotionally intelligent overall. However, you knew there's a however coming, right? However, we do have different emotional intelligence strengths that are considered gender specific. So let's take a look at those. In general, women tend to score higher than men in areas of empathy, social responsibility. You can think of that also as corporate social responsibility, and interpersonal relationships. So on average, men tend to score higher than women in areas of assertiveness, stress tolerance, and self-regard. What's another name for self-regard? Confidence. Yes, confidence. Men score higher in confidence. Now, do you think that's correct? No. Can you be empathetic and have substance and intelligence at the same time?
Yes.
Of course you can. We all know that, right? It even sounds absurd saying it. But that is the perception. So somehow being empathetic and being analytical are viewed as mutually exclusive. These women who are also high in those female attributes shared with me that they were told to, they shared with me that when they expressed emotions at work, they had some negative reactions. So one vice president that I interviewed in particular shared with me during a work performance review, she sat down with her boss. And they were talking through a really tough issue that she was having with the direct report. And she started crying during the discussion. So they worked through it, they talked through it, and it was over that meeting ended, and then she started noticing that she wasn't getting the special opportunities and projects anymore that she used to get as a VP. She just wasn't getting the opportunities, and when it dawned on her, she was able to link it back to that situation with her boss where she cried. Now, I bring up this example for you because we all express emotions at work, right? Sorry. We all express emotions, but even today, our workplaces are not completely friendly and embracing of outward displays of emotions. So it's something, for women in particular, something just to be mindful of and to keep in check. What emotions do we generally see from men at work? Yes, I heard it over here. Anger. Anger would be. Well, we see a range of emotions from men and women, but crying at work for women is, women often have a negative feedback from that, and then outward lashes of anger from men. as well. So we are emotional creatures. We're not robots. We should express our emotions at work. And we need to work together to have workplaces that are more embracing of emotions. So that's what women shared with me who are high in the EQ. So let's look at the other side of the coin. Women who are naturally higher in the male-specific attributes, so the confidence, the assertiveness, the stress tolerance. They shared with me that they weren't accepted as leaders because people expected an empathetic woman, right? So they were confident, they were assertive naturally, but then they heard comments that they weren't respected in their leadership role. I also heard comments from these women that were told to tone down their assertiveness and be more of a team player and be more social. So I can relate to this. I was raised to be confident, independent, and fiercely competitive. I thought that was the norm. I also grew up in a male-dominated industry. I am a female drummer. Yeah, see, are you a drummer too? Ish, a drummer-ish. I like that. So, I grew up my whole life with comments like, she's just a girl, she won't be able to play very well. I heard, she's gonna play too soft. I also heard she's not gonna be able to get along with her male bandmates. Now, none of that turned out to be true. Those perceptions of me that I've encountered were all based on bias. It was based on their biases of what a female drummer might be. So I shared that story with you because it makes it difficult for women when they reach a leadership level in their careers. It makes it difficult because there are opposing expectations. So whether you're strong in the female-specific EQ attributes or whether you're stronger in the male-specific EQ attributes, women experience resistance. So dual expectations often make it more difficult for women than for men in a leadership role. So that's based on bias. Okay, so let's talk about barriers to leadership. So I'll start with this image here. Can you all see that? People on the sides over there, on each side. So what I've done is in my research and in the book, I actually I looked at all the barriers. There's a lot of them. There's different types of barriers, but I put them in a category. So this is one category of barriers. Gender bias and gender stereotypes. And I'll explain agenic leader behaviors and role congruity in a minute. Okay, let's take a look at these stereotypes for a minute. Let's start with the female brain. We have a large region for chocolate. We have a pretty big shopping lobe. We have an area for musicals and sitcoms, fantasy and maternal urges and weddings. Let's look at the male brain. You have one big area that stands out in the male brain. Surrounding that, you have a lame excuses gland, a beer lobe, job stuff, ball sports, and one commitment neuron. So I show you this. The problem with stereotypes is not that they're inaccurate. A lot of these things are true, right? I could relate to the chocolate one. I absolutely agree with that. Shopping, not so much, but chocolate, absolutely. But the thing with stereotypes is it doesn't account for individual differences and nuances. It's not all women like musicals and sitcoms. Not all men play sports or are interested in sports. So it's not that they're untrue, but it doesn't account for the individual differences. So that's the problem here. Agenic leader behaviors, what that is, so these are all rooted in bias, by the way. What agenic leader behaviors is, when you think of a leader, so let me ask you, when you think of a leader, just what comes to mind right away? Name some characteristics for me. Assertive? Is that assertive? Okay. What was that?
A good listener.
A good listener. Okay.
Well put together.
Well put together.
Confident.
I like that. Confident. What else? When you think of a leader.
Intelligent.
Intelligent is in there. Normally when we think of in terms of a leader, most people say competitive, confident, assertive, decisive. I hear that one a lot. Even aggressive sometimes. can handle stress. We don't hear empathetic. We don't hear someone who's great at relationships. We don't hear someone who's great at collaborating and teamwork. So when we think in leader terms, we often think male terms. We don't think female terms. That's a type of bias that most of us hold. And so we need to challenge our thinking around what a leader is. Especially today, given the diversity and inclusion, we're becoming more diverse every day as a global society. Our image and vision of what a leader is has changed. So we just have to be mindful of that bias. Role congruity theory, what that is, we have certain assumptions about behaviors that need to be shown to be successful in certain roles. I'll give you an example. A female leader in the military. A woman in the military can be a fantastic leader, but she may not be met positively by those that she leads or her platoon because she's in a role considered incongruent with being a female. Another example, let's take a male nurse. Again, a man can be a fantastic nurse, but he may not be met positively by those that he works with or the patients he cares for because he's in a role considered incongruent with a male. That's role congruity theory. Now, doesn't mean that we shouldn't go into occupations that are male dominated. Okay, this is a perfect question for you guys, right? It does not. If you are passionate about a certain industry, you absolutely should go for it. But you may be met with more resistance because of role congruity theory. So my advice is to ignore what people say and just keep plugging away and follow your passions. So that's one category of barriers. Let's look at the next category. This is called structural obstacles. So this includes lack of access to lack of access to informal networks. What do you think? So give me a type of informal network. Golf. I heard golf. Yes. Getting together with golf. Getting folks together maybe after work or maybe taking a client out. What's another example of an informal network?
Happy hour.
Happy hour. Excellent. Drinks after work.
Fantasies and bowling.
Fantasy. That's a great one. Great one. No one's ever brought that up, but it's a fantastic example of workplace informal network. Now there's a term for these informal networks that's been around for a while. What do you think that could be? Yes, the Good Old Boys Network. Now I'm bringing this up because informal networks are critically important. So think about this. If you're on the golf course or you're having drinks or dinner or any sporting event with your co-workers or clients, you're in a relaxed setting, right? You let your guard down. You share personal information about yourself. You get intel about the company and maybe the industry in general. And most importantly, you're building relationships. Now, today, many women still don't have access to these informal networks. So these are alive and well today. And it's an important component of a barrier. So I'll give you an example. In the pharmaceutical industry, there was a company that had a meeting in Manhattan last year. And they had a free evening. And so a group of the men got together and said, hey, let's go catch the basketball game in Madison Square Garden. So a big group of guys did that and they went to the game. Well, a large group of the women were left at the hotel saying, well, what are we going to do? So they decided to get together and go have a nice dinner. So the next morning, these groups were sharing what they did the night before with each other. And one of the men asked the women, he says, why didn't you invite us to dinner? And she looked at him puzzled and said, why didn't you invite us to the game? That is a real example of how we simply aren't inclusive in our behaviors. Now, there are many women who would have loved to go to the game and see the basketball game. Some wouldn't, and that's okay. But many probably would have loved it. And there would have been a group of guys who may have loved to go to dinner. So we just have to think about our behaviors and make sure we're inclusive, especially with those informal networks. Lack of female role models. You've all heard this one. Now this one, it's still important. And the reason it's important is because when you look at the top and you don't see someone who looks like you, it can not only be discouraging, but it's hard to see a path to success. So that's why it's critically important that we have more women who are in leadership roles take a role model lead. Lack of female mentors, we still need more women to mentor junior colleagues. What the data shows is that women tend to be so encumbered with their daily activities that they don't take the time to mentor their junior colleagues. Men actually are much better at this than women are. Men will put their arm around a junior colleague and say, come on, I'll show you the ropes. Women tend not to do this as much with other women. There's no reason we can't, it's just we get caught up in our daily activities. But it's really important to continue to mentor our junior colleagues. And the last one is male sponsors. So I heard this on the panel, and I thought it was a great topic that a few of you brought up. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is a mentor helps you in your current role. They help you develop and they help you improve in that role. A sponsor helps you get to the next role. So a sponsor serves on your behalf as an advocate to help you move to that next level. Now, why is it important for women to have male sponsors in particular? Why would you guess? More access?
They have more access to the upper, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So she said they have more access to the upper levels, upper echelons. So, two reasons. One, there are many more men in decision-making positions of power than there are women. The other reason is optics. So picture a high-level meeting, closed-door meeting, and they're talking about succession planning. If Jane speaks up, so let's say Jane's the vice president. If Jane speaks up and says, I think Susan should be promoted, Susan's fantastic. That may not carry a lot of weight because the perception may be that she's just supporting her because she's another woman. If Bob speaks up in that same meeting and says, I think Susan should be promoted, Susan's fantastic, oftentimes that will carry more credibility. So for those reasons, it's critically important that women seek male sponsors. Now, as far as mentors, it's great to have a mix of men and women because you get different perspectives. Men and women think differently and they behave differently. So I would highly encourage you to have a variety in your mentorship network. But sponsors, if you could seek out some male sponsors to help you along the way, that would help significantly for advancing. The third category is individual mindset. So a large percentage of women hold themselves back for different reasons. Now, it could be lack of confidence or assertiveness. Sure, that could be a reason for some women, but not all women. The women that I interviewed, I often heard that women looked at the top and saw the politics and said, I don't want any part of that. And I heard that echoed again and again. So women often value work-life balance more than men. Men are willing to sacrifice in their careers and just climb the ladder and do what's needed to succeed. Not all women are willing to do that, and that's okay. We often want different things. So for different reasons, women self-select out of the workforce and hold themselves back. What the data shows is that women tend to get to the director level and they tend to settle in there, or they self-select out. A small percentage actually go on to vice president, president, and the C-suite. Fortunately, we are seeing more women, though, moving on. And then the last barrier within this category is office housework. What do you think office housework might be?
Break room, ordering.
Okay, keeping the break room orderly, okay?
Ordering lunch.
Ordering lunch. Cleaning up after lunch. What was that?
Note taker.
Note taker, good one.
Planning parties.
Planning parties, excellent. This is a good group. Anything else come to mind for you? What office housework might mean? How about bringing the donuts? Oh, today I should say gluten-free bagels. Tommy got the donuts. We're raised that way. That's how we're socialized.
It's to fulfill that brain lobe that you had on there, the maternal and whatever.
to be consistent with our brain wiring. Yes. What was that?
Because they know the men won't do it.
Okay, good. Those are excellent. Excellent. Also, the other piece is women want to be helpful. They want to be helpful. So that's a good thing. But again, the issue here is they're behind the scenes, they are time consuming, and they often don't get recognized by leadership. So here's my recommendation for you. If you are a woman who tends to volunteer for these types of activities, don't always raise your hand first. Let other people have an opportunity. Now, I know you are the best one to do it, and you can do it better than anyone else. I know you're thinking that. It's probably true. It's probably true. But allow others to have an opportunity. Here's the other key piece. If you are in charge of planning these events, don't ask for volunteers. Because 90% of the volunteers will be women. Assign roles. Assign roles. Jim can bring the donuts or the bagels at the next meeting. You know, Mary can help plan it and set up. Bob can be the note taker. So assign roles to you, ensure a gender mix. This is a really important point, and it may sound trivial, but these types of activities are so time consuming. Even what's also included in here is mentoring new hires. New hires need a lot of help. They need a lot of guidance, and women are often the ones who take the time and spend extra hours with that new hire. So I would encourage you all to volunteer for these activities. Again, they're needed to keep an organization moving, and to don't just rely on the women to always step up to do that. Men tend to volunteer for activities that are more visible, such as optional meetings or sitting on cross-functional teams. So it's in keeping with gender stereotypes, and so that's why I put this in the individual mindset category. Now finally, the other category is lifestyle choices. This is work-life balance, family choices, and breadwinner caregiver roles. So let's talk about this for a minute. Today's households, majority of households are dual income or single parent households. We don't see as many households nowadays where you have one parent working, one parent staying at home. Most times both parents work today. If a woman is the primary breadwinner of her household, she's usually the primary caregiver as well. If a man is a primary breadwinner of his household, he's rarely the primary caregiver. Now, this is a key distinction. even among millennial women. We still are seeing this. So the reality is if you have the lion's share of the child care and the household duties, the grocery shopping, the laundry, doing the dishes, the cooking, the cleaning, you're doing that and you're trying to manage your career full time, it's difficult. It's very difficult for anybody. Even if you're Superman or Superwoman, it's difficult for anybody to be successful at everything. So we have to make choices, and we have to make sacrifices. So I would recommend here is to have the discussion with your partner or your spouse. Now, I was surprised because when I interviewed women about this, many women said, I never had the discussion with my husband. So, what do you mean you never had this discussion? I said, isn't this a big decision you have to make? What are you going to do with your careers when you have a family? A lot of times the discussion never occurred because the assumption was she would just be the one to do it. So I encourage you, today in the 21st century, we are forward thinking, we are evolved, right? I would encourage you to have that discussion with your partner. I've heard some great examples about how couples they've traded off. So for example, let's say a woman takes a break from her career and takes time off to raise the children while they're young. Then when they get old enough, then she got a promotion and he took a step down in his career and they relocated for her job. That's a great example of trading off. So there's lots of things you can do. But the reality is the more parity we have at home, the more parity we will have at work. So I spent a lot of time on this one because it's a really important decision. And we should be having those conversations. Okay. Now, we're going to get into a group activity here because I would love to hear from you all as far as your experiences. Is there any questions on anything I've covered so far? No? Clear as mud? Okay, let's get into an activity. So, I was going to ask you to get into groups for 8 or 10, but you're already there. You're already in your groups, which is perfect. Have you personally experienced any of these barriers? Anything we've talked about? I know I just gave you a lot of information. Have you personally experienced any of these barriers yourself? And if so, what was the result of that? So let's take about 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, And then just share at your tables, and then I'll hear from a few groups and we'll talk about that.
He just arrived. We arrived at the table.
Someone's like, hey, okay, someone needs to be wearing this cap. I'm like, so people come close up. Yeah. That's catching on.
The guys taking the time out. One of the first meetings I sat on my
3 more minutes, and then we'll hear from the group. So, lots of lively discussion going on. So I'm really curious to hear from you, because you may have experienced barriers, not exactly like I've talked about today. You may have had other types of barriers, but I'm really curious about what your experience was and what the result was. Okay, so I'm going to ask for volunteers. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. Is there a table that would like to volunteer to start off with? Yes. To share what you discussed at your table? Okay. So I love the person who raises a hand and says they're going to share. That's delegation. Come on, you got it. Actually, do we have a handheld mic?
Oh my God. So we talked about how women treat each other and how this is something that maybe hasn't been discussed today on the dais, but that we've got a responsibility to be supportive of each other. And we talked about what could be the hurdles to why women may not be as supportive of each other as they, as people might like them to be. And if it has to do with fear, it's a small pie for the few that are already there. So expanding it makes you fearful that you're going to lose something. And what is it that can be done? Also talked a little bit about moving outside of your comfort zone and looking outside of your group for people who could be sponsors or mentors. Because sometimes you may be the only woman in a group of 20 people, and so it may be that you don't have a comfort level with finding someone who could be a sponsor there, but looking for a diversity of sources for sponsorship can actually end up helping you elevate yourself into a, or at least giving you a different perspective so that you don't feel like you're so enmeshed and not being heard. And also talked a little bit about how is it that if you're the only person in a room with a whole bunch of people who are different than you are, how is it that you can assert your presence? And we talked about literally standing up. So if you feel like you're being spoken over, and you can say, I'm sorry, I've been trying to be heard, no one's heard me, so I'm just going to literally stand up because I really want to draw a specific point, and being able to have the confidence and presence to be able to assert yourself like that.
You talked about a lot. Now, this side of the room, did you guys hear her? In the back over here? A little bit? So I'm going to lend my mic to, I just thought of whoever stands next. But thank you. She made several excellent points about women. Why don't women support each other? And there, actually, I had to think long and hard about this one. And I looked at the data because this is actually the #1 question I get is why don't more women support other women? And so I talk about it in the book extensively. There are 4 or 5 different reasons. One of the reasons is what you're saying. The pie is smaller at the top. And so there's competition, frankly, right? There's competition for fewer slots. Another reason, and I'm going to touch on this in the next section, is about gender culture. And this is something that I find most people are unaware of, is that men are raised in hierarchies, women are raised in a flat culture. So there's something called the power dead even rule. I'm going to give you a preview of what I'm going to touch on next. The power dead even rule. So why do women often cut other women or not support other women? One of the reasons, again, there's many reasons. One of the reasons is because women are raised that there's an even power distribution in the female culture. So what happens is when one woman rises above another woman, they act to cut her down and bring her back down to level. There's an even power distribution in the female culture. Men don't live in that culture. Women live in a very different culture. So because of the power dead even rule, that's part of the reason that women don't support other women, because they're bringing them back down to level. Because it within the culture of how we were raised, for all of us. All right, who would like to share next? I saw other hands up.
All right.
Here, I have the microphone.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Astrid.
I actually shared a story about my early career times where I joined a small engineering firm and I was the only female. Very common story, I'm sure, for many of us. And right out of college, and in the very first meeting that I started there, they actually told me, or voluntold me, I like to say, that I would be the note taker for the meeting. And they reassured me it was because my note-taking skills were awesome. Great. So, being just out of college, I was really excited that my note-taking skills were recognized and therefore I was the note-taker. However, this became the continuous trend and I got really frustrated with the fact that I was always the note-taker. And so I actually started to nominate others. And of course, when there was pushback from the other male colleagues that I had, I assured them that it was because they needed to work on their note-taking skills.
Love it. Let me give a round of applause. All right. Thank you. Other tables, let's hear about what you talked about as a group. Okay, don't everyone volunteer at once. Now, I know you guys talked about valuable things because I heard it when I walked by your table. So let's hear.
He was incompetent. Meanwhile, I was constantly asked, can you actually do this? How old are you? Are you old enough to be here? That kind of thing. So I had to prove that I was competent. And I see that at a way smaller level here. But sometimes the women do have to prove their competence, and men have to prove that they're incompetent.
You've heard women say, I have to work twice as hard to earn the respect. And oftentimes women that is true, women have to do that. And it's because of some of the barriers we've talked about. Because of bias, because of stereotypes, because of our gendered expectations of women. Women have to work doubly hard to prove themselves in a role. So the competence bar is a bit higher for women, oftentimes. So thank you for sharing that. All right, let's hear from another group.
So I was volunteered to speak American sports. He's not from the U.S. And when we, football season, fantasy football, the 16th, I don't even know the terminology myself. And either A, you feel a push to either immerse yourself in whatever sports talk, for example, that might be, or just feel that you just are completely left out of that. Comes with sports. It also comes with those happy hours. Veronica Navarro here, she talked about hearing about some of these after work activities, and she actually invited herself to go to these. And I think those are some decisions that each individuals have to make to see, is it worth it? I joined the fantasy football team in my department, and while I did not know hardly anything about football, it actually was a good learning experience. I end up liking the sport itself, and the following year I went first place, but I'm very humble, as you can tell.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great comment that she just made. They didn't invite each other and didn't think about it. So just being mindful, awareness and mindfulness goes a long way. Being mindful of our behaviors. Because you never know what can come out of diverse groups. And oftentimes wonderful things do come out of diverse groups. All right, let's hear from another table. We'll just take one or two more.
Expected, then it can kind of be somewhat frustrating. And I definitely have this problem where I say, let me know if you need any help with this at the end of sentences and emails. And we all kind of said we have similar experiences with that. And so like you were saying, we volunteer ourselves, where I think it would be nice if everybody maybe volunteered a little bit more, so that we weren't just working more in the background, where we're still trying to manage all the rest of our work and everything too, but kind of that expectation that somebody will help out with something.
Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause for sharing that. So real?
She went to his office and said, I appreciate the flowers, but I'm not an admin. Why'd you give me flowers?
well, because we also want to, to give you flowers, and you go all shy. And it's like, well, I appreciate, but did you give Peter flowers? Because he's an admin too. No, because he's a guy. It's like, well, I think you should review your policy then. And this was her second week at work when she's in her mid-20s. So she only told me this story about a few months ago, and I actually was very proud of her for doing that, for signing up. And this, again, 20 years ago when things were like this were not as common yet. So.
Yeah. Good for her.
So that's what I thought so too.
Did they change their behavior with the flowers? And
I think they gave out chocolates the next year.
To the men and women? To the men and women?
All that.
Progress. Thank you. Yes.
So we discussed at our table, I think a lot of times there's all these other barriers, but sometimes we're our own barrier. So it may not be female or male. It just, the individual mindsets like you spoke of, and all these things that we may be passed by on, maybe because we aren't marketing ourselves like Anna had spoke about earlier. So much of people might not know that you're interested in that if you haven't ever showed up at something, an event or to volunteer for a specific role. So it's not always a gender bias. It's sometimes it's just an individual mindset where we hold ourselves back, or exclude ourselves, and we don't market ourselves, we don't speak up, we don't raise our hand to say, actually, I'd like to do that next time, or if that comes up, another time I'd like to be volunteered for that, just we hold ourselves back sometimes, and instead of blaming other genders or other people, we need to kind of take accountability as women to speak up and say we want to be a part of this, I don't think a man might think to invite us to a basketball game, but hey, I'd like to be invited, or whatever it is, male, female, co-ed, speak up, invite yourself, say I want to be there, I want to be a part of this.
Yeah, so. Great, well said. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You don't always have to wait to be asked, but invite yourself.
We have an education, we have a goal, we have a purpose. If I want to be an engineer and that's what I do it right. If I'm a doctor or an admin or whatever person choose to be, male or female, you perform at the task that you want to be doing, regardless of their perception of what you should be doing. And that perception, even when they share it with you, should not bring you down. It's an opportunity maybe to educate that person on a different perspective. And sometimes when I talk to some of those people, I was like, well, I wouldn't like to be your daughter or your niece, because then you are just cutting the opportunities of the choices or the amount of choices that as a female, one of the persons on your family could have if that's what you think they should do. So bottom line is like, you do what you want to do, the choices are for each person regardless of genders or some of the other kind of things, and you just perform the tasks that you are meant to perform.
All right, let's give her a round of applause. It was off, all right. All right, excellent, you saved the day. So, gender culture. Actually, the more I talk about this, turning into one of my favorite subjects because it's fascinating. It's fascinating to sit back and watch how this all plays out, and we live this every day. So, this is just a whimsical look at gender differences. Let's take a more serious look at how this shows up in the workplace. Men and women are raised in different cultures. That culture starts at birth, and we carry that into the workplace as adults. This is not about rights and wrongs. It's simply about differences. Because of how we're hardwired differently and how we're socialized differently, we approach virtually every aspect of business differently. How we work within an organizational structure, how we conduct meetings, how we network, how we interpret information, how we communicate, work in teams, collaborate, solve problems, and finally, how we lead. Virtually every aspect of business is different. It's precisely these differences why we need gender balanced leadership, because we think and behave differently. And there's lots of data behind this. I believe your morning keynote speaker touched to some of this. There's lots of data behind diversity and inclusion and all the good things that can come about. But let's look at how gender differences play out in the workplace. What are the games boys play? Feel free to shout it out.
G.I. Joe. What was that? What night? Fortnite? Video game. What else do boys play? Cars. Trains. Football. Cops and robbers. Soldiers. So military games, video games, car games. So the lessons that boys learn very early in these games is that competition and they're taught lessons around winning and losing and competition. So boys get a lot of valuable lessons in these games. Boys learn how to play with people on the team that they may not necessarily like. They learn that when the game is over, you're friends again. Even though you claw each other's eyes out during the game, you're friends again. Go have hot dogs and pizza afterwards. Boys are also taught about hierarchy. There's a pecking order in life, a work in life. So if you think about a team, there is the coach, there's a star player, there is your above average player, there's your average player, and there's your bench warmer. There is a pecking order. The lessons boys learn very early is about win and lose in competition. Let's look at the games girls play. Feel free to shout them out. Dolls. House. Mommy. Playing mommy. That's part of house, I would think. Someone said something over here? Tea parties, yes. Did someone say cleaning? Are we really practicing cleaning as a 10-year-old?
Sports.
What other games do girls play? What was that? Store? Makeovers?
Volleyball.
Actually, animal games? Dancing and singing games? Okay, the lessons that girls are taught very early, very young, is that it's about the process. It's not about winning and losing. It's about the process of play. Girls are also taught that, remember the power even distribution? So girls are raised in a flat culture. They're taught that I am the same as you, you're the same as her, she's the same as her. Even power distribution, not the hierarchy. So girls also learn collaboration skills, teamwork, and communication skills in these games. So these are key lessons that girls are taught, very different than what the boys are taught. Let me ask you this. Have you ever lost at a game of Barbies? Has anyone ever lost at a game of Barbies? If you have, you're a really bad Barbie player. What I'm talking about here, it happens at a subconscious level. We're not consciously thinking, I'm going to have a meeting before the meeting because I'm going to maintain status in the hierarchy. Men aren't thinking that, and neither are women. But we do this because this is how we're socialized, constantly reinforced by society, by our parents, by our teachers, by movies, by TV shows, by the books we read. So men line their ducks up in a row before the meeting. So when the meeting occurs, the actual meeting on the calendar, it's really already happened. Now, in the female culture, this doesn't make any sense. Women don't do this. What a woman does is she goes to the meeting with all her great ideas, ready to dialogue with everyone else at the meeting. Unbeknownst to her, the meeting's really already occurred. Okay. So, remember, I'm not talking, not about rights and wrongs. These are just simply differences, according to our gender culture. So, at the meeting, we also conduct ourselves differently. Men tend to speak in a declamatory voice with authority. They tend to interrupt others more, and they tend to resist being influenced in public. Again, it's about maintaining status in that hierarchy. Women tend to wait their turn, nod, and smile more in meetings. Watch this the next time you're in a meeting. Watch these behaviors. Now, I bring this up because it's about perceptions, right? In this picture here, if you have a man standing up and he's talking in a declamatory voice, he sure sounds authoritative. He sure sounds like a leader. And if a woman is sitting back and raising her hand and waiting her turn, what's the possible perception? The perception is that he looks more like a leader than she does. So I want you to be aware of these behaviors. Let's take another example. We have differences in how we communicate. Let's start with successes and failures. When it comes to success, men tend to point inward and say, I worked really hard on this project, put in a lot of time, and I did it. When it comes to failure, men tend to point outward, saying, I wasn't that into it, didn't have enough time, or pointing to external factors. So success and failure is very different. Women, just the opposite. When it comes to success, women tend to point outward, giving credit to their team, saying, I had a great team, I got lucky, or it was good timing. When it comes to failure, where do you think women point? Inward. Just the opposite. Even if it's not their fault. Women tend to take the blame even if it's not their fault. So, I think we can learn from each other here. Men could learn from women and give more credit to other people. Women can learn from men and take more credit for your successes and own your successes. We also have differences in how we listen. So I find this one fascinating. If you watch a man and a woman in a conversation, a man will sit there and he will usually only nod when he agrees with what's being said. Women are very different. Women tend to nod during the whole conversation. Now, I can relate to this because I'm a nodder. I'm constantly nodding when I'm talking to people, no matter who it is. I'm nodding. What women are saying to the speaker is, I hear you, keep going. It doesn't mean she is agreeing with what's being said. So, oftentimes we miss each other from a communication standpoint because if you're in a meeting with a male colleague and a woman is nodding the whole time, let's say most of the time, after the meeting, he's going to assume that she was on board and agreed with everything that was said. Oftentimes that's not the case. So when she comes back and questions something, he sees it as insubordination. Not insubordination, she's simply questioning it because she wasn't agreeing, but the perception is he perceived her as agreeing. Do you guys follow that?
Yes. Sometimes women even say right, like you're acknowledging that you're hearing and you say right, I hear you, rather than
yes.
no, I don't agree.
It's excellent. So we can network differently. What's interesting about this is men in the workplace are better networkers because they've been taught to network their entire lives. But women actually have larger networks. So if women just leveraged their vast networks, that would go a long way. If you reached out more often to your colleagues or your acquaintances and said, hey, just want to touch base, how you doing? I'm working on this, how can I help you? That would go a long way. Okay, that's communication. Let's look at leadership. So there's lots of different leadership styles out there. Here are two of the most common. Transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Transactional leadership is an even exchange of transactions between leader and follower. I do this for you if you do this for me. An example is, let's say a male boss says to his junior colleague, John, you worked really hard on this project, give me 110%, and I'll make sure you get the next promotion. That's an example of transactional leadership. It's very common in business and politics. It's also associated with men. It's a male style of leadership. Now, transformational leadership is a very different, it's a type of leadership where the leader and follower, you have more even controls, you have collective problem solving, collective decision making. Transformational leadership is also built on ethics, values, emotions, and long-term goals. Women are naturally transformational leaders. So we can all become better transformational leaders, men and women, by leveraging your empathy, your listening skills, your communication, your collaboration skills. That will help you be a better transformational leader. And lots of data, there's been lots of studies about transformational leadership. It's shown that in today's contemporary global high-paced organizations, transformational leadership is the type of leadership style we need. All right, let's move on. Any questions so far on gender differences? All right, so this sums it up. What's the take home? The take home is on promotion, especially for women. Okay, you ready for some strategies? What can we do about all this now? So I would encourage you to take notes if you're interested, or you can take pictures of the slides. I'm going to give you 3 strategies for every barrier we've talked about today. First of all, gender culture, the topic we just touched on. Here are 3 suggestions for you. Reinterpret the opposite gender's intent. If you ever scratch your head and say, why does he do that? Or why is she doing that? If the opposite gender is acting in a way that makes no sense to you, they are likely acting in a way that's consistent with their gender culture. So what we need to do is recognize that and just reinterpret their behavior. It may make no sense in the male or female culture, but in their culture it's perfectly appropriate. Second thing, flex your style by modifying your behavior to be in sync with the other person's gender culture. So flex and adapt, and there was a great example given at the table over here about doing that. The third suggestion, talk about the differences and the best ways to work together. That's probably the best thing you can do. If there's an elephant in the middle of the room, talk about it. You know, you can say, hey, Mike, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye in the past. How can we work together in a way that mutually supports each other? Just something as simple as that to help get the conversation going. So those are 3 suggestions for gender culture. As far as the institutional mindsets, here are a few suggestions for you. Be honest with yourself about biases. We are all biased. Every single one of us, based on our upbringing, our background, our values, and what we've been taught. So be honest with yourself about biases you may hold. The more you can make decisions collectively, the better. That helps take bias out of the process. So there's a saying. It's easier to take bias out of process than it is out of people. And that's very true. So make decisions collectively will help take the biases out. That could be decisions in hiring, it could be promotion decisions, it could be budget decisions, succession planning decisions. So anytime you can make them collectively will help. And finally, don't make assumptions that women are limited in their commitment, travel, or ability to take a new assignment if they have children at home. I've heard this quite a bit, that if a woman is pregnant or has small children at home, she would be passed over for an assignment because the assumption is she has small children, she won't be able to travel. She won't want to do it. The women I interviewed actually was just the opposite. They said they wanted the opportunity. They wanted a break. Please give me that special assignment. So now, caveat with this one, this doesn't apply just to women. It also applies to men. Not all men want to travel 5 days a week every week, right? There's plenty of men who would prefer not to travel so much. So the bottom line here is don't make assumptions about anybody. Make sure you're asking your team what they want and what their preferences are. Okay, the next category, structural strategies. Seek mentors and sponsors and develop reciprocal relationships. Oftentimes, mentors and sponsors get as much out of the relationship as you do. And it's often, as I mentioned, it's often reciprocal. So make sure you're seeking the vast network and make sure you have a good diversity of men and women. Cultivate and leverage your network. I've touched on that one, especially for women. And be inclusive in all your behaviors. And that's going back to the example with the pharmaceutical company. Just make sure you're being inclusive and you're not excluding. The saying is, if you're not actively including, you're probably unintentionally excluding. So if you're not actively being inclusive about your behaviors, you're likely unintentionally excluding somebody or some group. As far as individual strategies, take on new challenges and take risks. There is a difference in risk-taking between men and women. Women tend to ruminate much more than men do. Women will think things through and think of long-term and think about all the different factors. And so it takes women sometimes longer to make a decision, but oftentimes it's an accurate decision because they've taken that time up front. But sometimes this rumination keeps us from taking risks. So I would encourage you to take those new challenges and responsibilities. And someone on the panel said it, say yes. Who was that? Is he still in the room? Yes, I love that. I love that. Actually, an example I give in the book is when it comes to TED Talks, there's a TED organizer, and he was looking for speakers for TED Global and said no. That's a true story. Why is that? So we often don't say yes. We don't take the risk we should. Because if you take a risk and you don't like it, you've learned something. If you take a risk and you fail, you've learned something. So I would encourage you to take those new challenges on. For women, take credit for your successes more and speak confidently and speak often. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And there was a table that mentioned that beautifully. As far as lifestyle strategies, have an honest dialogue with your employer about your needs, your work-life balance needs. So today's organizations, with the influx of millennials and Generation Z behind them, our HR departments are scrambling to keep up and meet the needs of these new generations. This is very good news for all of us, especially for women. So millennials value work-life balance more than older generations had in the past. They also are demanding flexibility, part-time assignments, work-from-home assignments. So if you have these needs, don't be afraid to share those with your employer, because employers are listening now. Have an honest dialogue with your spouse or partner about breadwinner and caregiver issues. Again, that's a critical decision and a critical discussion that should be had. And finally, role modeling equity at home is the last suggestion here. There's really interesting data behind this one, is that daughters, when daughters see dad helping out around the house, doing the dishes, doing the laundry perhaps, those daughters tend to go into occupations that are less stereotypically female. There's actually robust data behind that. So when your kids are watching, when kids see parity at home, that gets reflected in their career choices. So that's powerful. Okay, men. We have a large percentage of men in the room. What, maybe 75 men in the room? Okay, I'm going to speak specifically to you here. We need your help. We are not going to get anywhere close to gender parity without men on board. Actually, we will not achieve it. Include women. Develop women, listen to and promote women actively. We also need men to commit to changing the leadership ratios. We would ask that men commit to diversity and inclusion. And finally, commit to fairness. I find with men, the vast majority of men, the reason we have a leadership gender gap is not men's fault. And it's not women's fault. It's actually a little both. But we can't point the fingers either way. I find with the vast majority of men are simply unaware of these behaviors and these barriers that women experience, that all of you have shared today. So committing to a sense of fairness and diversity, having your teams more diverse and inclusive goes a long way. Now, if you do this, here is all the benefits that you will reap. There's a long list. Better listeners, more empathetic, more self-aware, enhanced interpersonal skills. I think that was touched on during the panel. You'll have larger networks, new perspectives. You'll be viewed as a valued rainmaker in your industry and in your company. Respected by your peers, you'll be a more effective leader. You'll help your organization's bottom line. And the last one, it's a lofty goal, but be better husbands and fathers. So we need men. We have to have men on board. All right. Any questions or comments about that? That's the first time I've ever shared that slide. I actually made that slide for you guys, specifically for this talk. So hopefully that resonates. Okay, and finally I'd like to share a personal story with you. The story behind this picture. That is me getting my undergraduate degree at UC Irvine. But getting to that point was difficult. So for me, high school was pretty easy for me, so I didn't develop the steady habits that I needed. I actually grew up in Fresno, by the way. So I've done the 99 trail quite a bit growing up in college. So born and raised in Fresno, went to Clovis Fest High School. I didn't develop the steady habits I should have. So I come to UCI as an undergraduate, pre-med major of all things, and my grades started tanking. The classes were a lot harder than I thought. There were 200 people in the audience. I barely knew the professors, if at all, and it was way more work than I anticipated. So I think my first year, I had maybe a C average, C plus average. So I was put on academic probation. The second year, it got worse. Even being on academic probation, it got worse. Failed calculus a few times, failed chemistry, I hated statistics. So I ended up having, I think finally at that point, I think I had like a B+ average. So at the end of my second year, I met with my academic counselor. And he, sitting in front of me, looked at my transcripts, and he looked me in the eye and said, "Sean, I recommend you take some time off." In translation, what he was saying is I need to leave the university. So I took that advice. I went to the park. If any of you are familiar with UC Irvine, there's a park in the center, the circular park called Aldridge Park. I remember sitting in the middle of this park crying, thinking, I just got kicked out of the university. I just got kicked out. So I had to withdraw from my classes, say goodbye to my friends, and leave the university. Now, I did take time off. I took 2 years off. In that 2 years, well, first of all, let me say that was devastating, first of all, to be kicked out, because I didn't think it would even get close to that. I thought I'd get my grades up and no problem. So, in those 2 years, I had to do some soul searching. And I had to get serious about what I really wanted and learn about who I really was. So in those 2 years, I joined a band as a drummer, joined my first band. I got my EMT license and started working at emergency rooms and hospitals. And the third thing I did was take classes at junior colleges to get my GPA back up. And I loved all of that. So after 2 years, I was readmitted back to UCI. I changed my major to psychology, and I happily graduated. Fast forward 20 years later, that is me getting my doctorate degree from Pepperdine University after being kicked out of college. So I shared this story with you because it's a story about lows and highs, but it was a turning point in my life. The story is mostly about perseverance, though. So as we talked about today, we all have setbacks in our lives and our careers. It's about perseverance. It's about pushing that boulder up the mountain. So I want to leave you with this. Be encouraged. Women are slowly making gains. Slowly, but we're getting there. Be persistent. Don't give up on your aspirations, whatever those may be in your career. And finally, speak up for what you really care about. And it's going to vary for each of you. And with that, I encourage you to connect with me on social if you're interested in these topics and keeping up to date. And I also have a free 25-page power perception workbook on my website that you can download. And that follows each chapter in the book that you have. So it's a workbook built around each chapter in the book. With that, I thank you very much. You've been a great audience today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. We're definitely going to take note of that, right? Just please don't talk to my little brother about the benefits of playing Fortnite. I've been trying to get him up and that for a while now. So with the wrap up of the presentation, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Please be back here in 5 minutes so then we can resume into our activities. Thank you.
So you got that on the weekends. Honestly, that is a real fight
on the weekends. Melissa Morse, Brandon Myers, Carlos Contreras, Aniba Laraya, Elizabeth DeStevens, Chad Jones, Margita Thompson, Alana Sotiri, and Todd Stevens.
Okay, so today we are excited to announce the launch of our Win Champion initiative. A Win Champion is someone who goes out of their way to provide support either to a member of Win or the group as a whole. This support can come in various ways, such as mentorship, volunteering, promoting Win to other teams or management, or connecting us with resources we may not have access to otherwise. In general, a WIN champion is someone who opens a door for us at WIN. Today we'll be recognizing our first group of WIN champions. Each champion will receive a coin with the logo shown behind us. Is that fair? Okay, perfect. The laurel signifies the recognition of your role as a champion in our journey. And once we recognize everyone, we'll take the opportunity to take a group picture with everyone.
So Anita Powers, she's not in attendance today, but we still wanted to recognize her for everything she's done. Anita is one of the board of directors for CRC and is our executive sponsor for WIN. She has extensive experience in the oil and gas industry and is always happy to offer advice when needed. Anita has been a huge supporter of WIN and has helped guide us to who we are today. A company-wide group that fills a need for CRC, providing value for bridging knowledge gaps, as well as mentoring employees to provide the knowledge, experience, and confidence they need to be the best versions of themselves every day. Anita encouraged us to find me the data that supports our initiatives and was the sounding board through all of our major steps during our rebranding efforts. She has been a supporter of this group since its inception, and her input and direction has been so valuable that it's really hard for me to say how much we appreciate her support and feedback in this short time slot that I've been allotted today.
Mary Rosas. Mary Rosas is the Director of Local Public Affairs. I met Mary when I was invited to attend a luncheon for the LA County Women's Commission, a group with a vision to advocate for the lives and well-being of all women through building strong collaboration, sharing available resources, and educating and empowering through participation in the legislative process. At that event, those who knew Mary praised her as an incredible asset and connection to have, and I learned very quickly that they were right. She is continuously connecting WIN members with opportunities to network and develop by attending women leadership conferences or business luncheons, or to advocate for public policy change at the Latina Action Day in Sacramento. In addition, she is always willing to help in any way she can. Thank you, Mary, for being a WIN champion and always looking for ways to support her members.
Melissa Morse. Melissa is the Central Valley Operations Leader, and she was approached by HR along with other senior leadership ladies to see if she could help build a resource group for women within CRC. An opportunity to which she jumped right on, as you can imagine. She has been ready to take the lead to empower us women of CRC into taking leadership positions. But as she has mentioned herself, she hasn't had to take the lead because the WIN Steering Committee has run with the responsibility since day one. However, Melissa has always been present in every activity that WIN has planned, whether she is there in person or in the planning stage herself. We are very lucky to have her support, and this is why we would like to name her as a WIN champion. Thank you. Brandon Myers. Brandon is the plant manager of Elk Hills Power. Maria Williams, the subcommittee lead of community and STEM outreach, nominated Brandon for his support of WIN's first community outreach event. Brandon volunteered himself and his team to give a plant tour to the Liberty High School Girls in Government group. This gave these students the opportunity to learn about the equipment, the systems used in gas processing, oil production, and power generation. Brandon shared his technical knowledge with them and encouraged them to pursue STEM careers. Thank you, Brandon, for supporting community and STEM outreach and a key part of WIN's mission.
Carlos Contreras. He couldn't make it today, but we wanted to recognize him. Carlos Contreras is the VP of Commercial. Several months ago, Mandy and I were given the opportunity to promote WIN to Todd's management team. And when we asked if there were any questions, Carlos was the first to speak up. He said he wanted us to talk to his team. There was no hesitation to support WIN, and that is what was so great about it. And Carlos didn't just say it. He invited Sabrina Cisneros, the membership chair, and me to attend one of his weekly staff meetings, and we even had time to bounce ideas off of him and his team about what WIN is currently doing and what we could do in the future. Carlos also gathered his entire floor in the Landmark building in Long Beach so that we could talk to them about WIN and try to recruit them. These opportunities and this support is so important for a group that is just starting out.
Anibal. Anibal Arai is the leader for thermal operations. Since the day I met Anibal, he has always been extremely supportive of my career development and advancement. And I know I'm not the only one that he has been a champion for here at CRC. Everyone needs a champion or a sponsor in their career at some point to help push them in the right direction, to challenge them when they need to be challenged, in order to help them grow. Anibal has helped me to recognize that I am capable of many great things and was one of the key drivers in helping me advance my career to where I am today. So, this is a personal thank you, Anibal, for being a champion, for a member of WIN and in my career, and for others here at CRC as well. I truly do appreciate your challenges, your encouragement, your sponsorship, and your support. Thank you. Elizabeth DeStevens. She isn't able to attend today. However, Elizabeth is the VP of our Reserves and Corporate Development Group. Elizabeth continues to be a prolific contributor and a timeless WIN supporter. She routinely participates in the program committee meetings and has been instrumental in developing the Power Lunch format and has helped us find resources for WIN discussions. She also presented a Power Lunch for us on organizational dynamics and innovation, lessons from the trenches. She is exemplary as a senior CRC leader who continues to invest personally in WIN's ongoing growth and success.
Chad Jones. Chad is the leader for the Operations Resources Group and has been a supporter of CRC WIN since we rolled the group out to senior management. Within minutes of us completing our presentation, Chad reached out and asked to connect with us on how we can reach out to a larger group to discuss career paths in operations. A career path that can provide many opportunities to young leaders within CRC. Chad offered his support and has opened another door for WIN to grow and to show how we can add value to CRC. Thanks, Chad, for seeing a need that CRC has and for reaching out to us to fill that gap, as well as for being a pillar for the continued growth of this group.
Margita. Margita is the VP of Communications for CRC, and from the beginning, Margita has been one of WIN's strongest and most consistent sponsors. She has supported the steering committee directly by providing training and development opportunities. She has also recently invited the entire WIN membership to her home for a networking session attended by women leaders from many different industries. Margita has shared her personal experience and insights by presenting a Power Lunch for us this past April on creating your personal brand. And for that, we thank you so much, Margita.
Alana Sotiri. Alana Sotiri is the VP of People Operations. Even before day one, Alana was a WIN champion. Last July, before we had a name, before we had a mission, before we had a steering committee, Alana and a group of women met to discuss the possibility of creating an employee resource group for women. At that point, we didn't know what we wanted to become, but starting that day, Alana helped to shape the vision for the kickoff and connected us to our executive sponsor, Anita Powers. Since the beginning, Alana has been an amazing mentor and sponsor to me and a supporter of WIN. She has guided us and motivated us to establish ourselves as an important part of CRC. Thank you, Alana. Todd Stevens. Everyone knows who Todd is, but what everyone might not know is how supportive Todd has been to WIN since its inception. To start, he was involved during the kickoff event. He brought members of WIN to his management team meeting to pitch our group. This has allowed us to form connections to other managers, allowing additional growth of our group. He has been responsive to all of our requests for backing, and without support from upper management, groups like WIN tend to slowly disintegrate. However, Todd's support has provided the foundation for unprecedented growth in our inception year, and has also provided us access to key members and mentors that we may have never had access to without him. Thanks for everything you have done for WIN thus far, and we look forward to our continued growth.
WIN
be possible without the efforts of each of our champions. Each of you have helped us to promote our mission within CRC, and you have been an essential part of our journey so far. Thank you for your continued support.
This is kind of a big wow. I didn't anticipate. I know when we talked about this, we thought 100, 120, and I think someone said it's approaching 200, which is really terrific. And I think it's so important because we talk all the time about being a great company and doing great things. It goes back to a basic premise I always say is we have to reflect the communities we live and work in. And we have to foster an environment that wants to encourage the best and brightest in those communities to want to work for us. And that's men and women alike, everyone, whether it's here, whether it's Santa Paula, whether it's Long Beach. And so for us to try to attract the best and brightest, you have to have the culture that fosters the best and brightest wanting to be there. So I think this is a great start the last year, and I think it just gets more renowned throughout Bakersfield and elsewhere, so that people understand, hey, there's a really great thing going on at CRC. We want to be a part of that. We want to work there. But some things I think were key that Sean said and what the topics we're talking about today, which I tell everyone who ever asks me for advice. And one of the most important ones is find a mentor and don't make it in your chain of command. So find somebody who's outside your chain of command, male or female, who could be helpful to your career. That's been around the block, seen a few things, because it's so important for you to be able to bounce something off people who have had those kind of experiences elsewhere in the industry or at CRC or at Oxy that help your career. And it'll be a two-way street. It'll benefit them also. And if you're in leadership, and we've made some changes to leadership, and again, we're always tweaking to try to get better. So we're always going to make changes to try and adapt to the assets we have and the human capital we have, the financial capital we have. But if you're a great leader, you know what those folks who work with you, what they want to do when they grow up, if you want to look at it that way. What they want to do in their career. Because the biggest mistake we make as engineers or geoscientists is we always assume everyone wants to be promoted and do a job kind of like yours. When in reality, if you don't know those people in a way that you should, you won't know what they really want to do, what kind of work they really want to do, or where they want to live, what are they open to, it goes back to that basic premise, don't assume anything. And Margita will testament to the whole adapting to your boss. I talk in sports and military analogies, and Margita never knew anything about sports. Now she knows a lot about sports. So, but the one thing, and a lot of you know I went locally to Bakersfield High School, and a lot of football coaches say the same thing. What does assume mean? Assume means you make an ass out of you and me. And that's what happens when you assume your employees want to do something. You have to know. You can't think you know. You have to know. And you have, because that relationship is a little bit on the employee and yourself too, is to make sure they know. Make sure they understand what do you want to do with your career and what kind of things are important. Because today's day and age, things are a lot different. The dynamics of the workplace driven by technology are a lot different. So we can adapt as a company to people who need to take time off for family reasons, pregnant or otherwise, so it's something that we don't want to lose great employees. We don't want to lose people who want to work here, want to contribute, want to be a part of something special. So we're going to adapt to that, and you just got to speak up. I think I'll use a few personal examples. I'm a father of 4 daughters, so I think the one thing you have to do is have good communication. That's the number one thing. And it's a two-way street in all those cases, is have good communication. And just like I was talking to my table, my wife and I are both engineers. So all my daughters are predisposed to math, okay? So they're good at math. So what does that mean? Most those type of jobs are still male dominated. So I tell them, when you go to a male dominated industry, whether it's ours or other ones, you have to be able to fit in, speak their language. Margita tried to fit in and learn sports because she knows I talk in those ways. But I put it on myself as a dad to teach my daughters about the types of things that men talk about. So the most proud moment in the last year, and I know some of you have heard this story, my daughter Claire, who's at Rice University, was interviewing for an internship with a researcher. And she was going against graduate students, she was an undergrad, and they're gonna have to spend a lot of time together on the weekends going through and doing research. It was all around undiagnosed disease network. But when she got to the interview, she noticed on the guy's desk, he had a hockey puck. It was a Montreal Canadiens hockey puck. So she starts talking about hockey with the man, and then starts talking about the LA Kings, and they got the conversation off for 20 minutes talking about hockey, and then an hour afterwards she calls me up and says, "Dad, I got this job because of you. Because I would never have known anything about hockey if you wouldn't force me to go to all those games." But that's just a funny way to do it, but it's part about immersing yourself in the culture and adapting to the environment you're in, but also preparing yourself for success. You know where you're at and prepare yourself for success. Not everyone's the same. Everyone has different ideals, goals, ways of doing things, but you have to adapt and learn how to be successful in different organizations. We talked about earlier informal and formal network. Every company has an informal and formal network. If you don't know it, you need to figure it out. Okay? And trust me, you'll be able to figure it out. It doesn't take long to figure that out. Because the one that pisses me off the most in the last year was Doug Klepacki. I mean, a lot of you know Doug, okay? Doug was an exceptional geoscientist. I mean, there's other ones, but he left for a competitor in Tulsa. He went to Tulsa, come on. There's no excuse, that's on us. That's a failure of leadership that he left our company, because we have much more exciting things to do, much more exciting opportunities, and the opportunity to create value is so much greater where we work, okay? So I think from our perspective, we failed Doug. I just use Doug as an example because that was the one that set me off early this year, because people are a critical asset for us. We have great assets up and down the state of California, but without the people in this room and elsewhere, they're nothing. Okay, so keeping those people here, wanting to be here, I think it's great that everyone turned out. I told everyone, we want to encourage people to do these type of things. Encourage yourself to get involved in the community. Something very different from pre-spin days. We want to be engaged, because it not only helps us as a company, but it helps you develop as a person. Because as a company, people learn what we actually do, what we don't do. It's critical. It's critical for people to understand. It's critical to fit in communities where, in a state where it's really pretty anti-business overall. If you're in the business of trying to make money, the government's in the business of trying to take it away from you in some fashion. So I think it's important for you to want to be in communities that want you to be there. And if you educate them about what you want to do and what we do, I think it's critical that we will have success going forward. So I wanted to give you a specific example of why diversity is so important. The most important thing for us at the spin, besides picking the management team and having the employees and all that, was really picking a board of directors. Most of you aren't familiar with the board of directors in some capacity. Obviously you know Anita. The board is really important. The public company board is the fiduciary for our shareholders. They're the ones that are watching out for the best interests of our shareholders. What does that really mean? Well, they have really two main roles. One is to hire and fire the CEO. I mean, they're the ones that make that determination. And secondarily, is they're always checking, is the strategy make sense? Are things on track? Talking to enough folks in management, do things make sense? Okay? So I'd seen, at our prior pre-spin company, a board that was highly dysfunctional, and because it was picked for all the wrong reasons. It was picked because they were a yes man or woman, or they needed to be a director for a paycheck, which is a sad thing. But so we really spent a lot of time and a lot of effort at the spin to pick people that are going to be very helpful to me as CEO and helpful to the company, because you want folks that are going to bring the right kind of experience. And so what's interesting to me is we have some oil and gas people on our board, and a lot of times whenever I talk about bringing on non-oil and gas people, they're always like, they don't know anything about oil and gas. And I said, well, that's a good thing. Because we're not trying to get groupthink. We're trying to get different people to think different ways. The one big failure, and Mike and I have talked about this a lot, is we weren't able to attract any women at the spin. I went back last night, looked at my notes. We had 35 identified candidates that were potential directors through a headhunter that had been vetted. And really our criteria was, were they a business leader? Were they familiar with California? Or were they an industrial business that could add value in a different way? 14 of those were women. Not a single one said yes for a variety of reasons that we were able to attract to come on our board. Now we have a top tier board, And Anita was always on our radar, just so you know. I was waiting for her to retire from Oxy, because when I knew Anita, and a lot of you knew her and worked with her in the past, she was no nonsense, straightforward, straight shooter, been around the industry, brings a great perspective. And so I was just literally waiting for her to retire to give an opportunity for us to bring her on our board. But that gives you the perspective of, you know, we identified 35 and we still weren't able to find one woman at the time. And then we found a lady who was actually on Southwestern's board, Kathy Kerr. She came over, but then Southwestern started having issues and she was promoted to be chairperson of Southwestern, and it was too much for her to be on more than one board at the time. So she stepped off our board. So then we were back at square one. We attracted Anita. One thing I will tell you is, as of today, the next board member is actually going to be a woman as long as she passes all the background checks. Mike's in the process of doing that right now. We had a board meeting last week. She met with all the board members she hadn't met with before. Everyone gave a thumbs up. I think everyone will be very impressed with her. She's not from our industry, but she has a tremendous background and experience that will be invaluable for the company. Because that's what's most important. What do you bring to the table? It's not for you to come and have a meeting and get fed a meal and take a paycheck home as a director. It's really what kind of value are you adding to the company? Just like employees, we want employees who are going to add value. We want directors who are going to add value. That if I have consternation on something, I can call someone up about. Because I think that's critical. And that's one thing we've been trying to balance out. And to be honest, most directors are somewhere between 50 and 70. And it's hard to find people who want to serve on boards. You know, qualified people. You don't just want somebody to fill a seat. And just so you know, we actually get graded on what our board looks like and who's on our board. So Mike and I were talking about some criteria where, you know, depending on the background of the person, you know, you get credit or you get a minus. Publicly traded company, they like you. They want you to be on boards because they think you bring good insight. So that's our challenge, is finding the kind of folks that are going to be value additive to us. But I think you'll be real pleased to know that the next one actually is going to be a lady that I'm very impressed with, and she did some tremendous things over the years. And I don't know, we probably won't announce it for a month or the earliest, but Mike has to finish New York Stock Exchange and kind of background checks and stuff for the SEC. But I think it's important to understand, as a company, we're trying to do things that matter. Again, it's about performance at the end too. We want to be great, and it's you can't rely on yourself just because you look in the mirror and see you're a woman or a man. Everyone faces adversity at some point in time. Like the stuff we talked about, and hopefully that wasn't the Army where you had that experience, since I was in the Army. It was the Army?
Missile systems repair.
Okay. So you were in the field, air defense artillery. But it reminds me, I told the story at the table about when I went to West Point many years ago, women had just gotten admitted not that long before that. And it was sort of interesting to me because some of the officers who were staff there were having big problems with it. And, you know, I was in the mentality, if they can do what I can do, that's fine with me. You know, no one cares. You know, it's like, and that's really what it came down to, and I think why it adapted over time. But it is the government. When I went there, we were 11% female, and now it's 22% female. So, but again, it's probably not a good indication simply because it is a unique environment to want to go into that, you know, the profession of arms and be in the military. It's a little different. But I think it's important to understand that all of us are getting better at this, but we're not perfect. You know, and the government believes perfect at doing all these things. They try to mandate things and they don't understand how they really happen. And but we have to foster that and make sure we understand how we foster that and how we include those things. So if you're in a leadership position, you've been around the block, you expect to be a mentor. Greet the young women or the people that look a lot like you who were, you know, new to our organization. You know, be involved, be helpful to them, because I don't care if you're new, if you're I'll pick on Deanna right here in the front. She's new to us, only had been here a few weeks. But everyone, I know Margita's probably swamped her with things, so helping her out. But I think it's important, no matter where you sit in the organization, be welcoming, be helpful to the folks involved, and foster the kind of culture that brings about greatness of a great company, where people want to actually work here. You know, that's my hope. The thing that bugs me the absolute most would be, I think it's an intelligence test. If you want to go work for Era, Chevron, you live in Bakersfield, you know, that's you just sort of failed the intelligence test, you know. And if there's a good reason why, then we failed you as an organization, as leadership. Because we're trying to do the things to attract the best and brightest, to have a great brand new, not brand new building, but it looks brand new because of the way it's kept up. And here in town, that's going to foster and keep the best and brightest here in Bakersfield with us, and understand those careers. So from my perspective, why do we have people, Bill, I don't know if everyone knows you, please stand up real quick. Yeah, Bill worked with us, decided to retire, then he failed at retirement. So, but with all seriousness, Bill is a great resource. He has been around the block and seen a lot of things in our industry. And the reason we brought him back is he's an invaluable mentor to anyone and everyone. So he's working with Alana and the people operations, but it's just folks like that you should be aware of and feel you have a great resource that you can rely on. It's Gloria, okay? So there's not a person Gloria doesn't know. There's not a thing she hasn't done here in town. So, I mean, if you say, well, I don't have a mentor and I'm here in Bakersfield, trust me, Gloria will be happy to mentor you and teach you the way around the block. Because she's been here and done that for a long time. But serious, we have a lot of folks like that. And it's up to you. It's a two-way street. Reach out, find those folks in the company. They're happy to help you out. I'd like to give it open for questions. And really, my last thing I'll say before questions is, if we're not doing the right things and it's failing you, even the leadership is failing you, you gotta let someone know. Whether it's me, whether it's Alana, whether it's Mike, let us know, because we will fix those things. We don't pretend to be perfect and happen instantaneously, but if there's a failure of leadership going on in the organization, we will remedy it eventually. We will adapt, we will do that, but you have to make us aware. You have to communicate and let us know. To what Sean was saying, don't hold it in, don't take credit for your successes. I think it's important to understand that. And if you have a great leader, they'll make sure you get credit. If you don't have a great leader, then you should say, why didn't the leader give me credit? That's when you have to talk to them about it, have a conversation, because I think it's important. So with that said, I'd be glad to answer any and all questions to the best of my ability without giving away any trade secrets. A lot of people, it's not the same. So when December, they're going to move to just one floor out of those 4 floors, and there's a basement. I think the one thing that'll impress most people, and impress the hell out of me, is the basement. You literally, we'll be able to store all our files, records, all our log cores and logs, everything in the basement. So when you want to go look at a core, you could just take the elevator down to the basement. It's enormous, and we would probably have enough room, and we're in the process of working on this, to have a gym and those kind of things too, but we're trying to work through all that for employees. Because again, it goes back to what we said, it is a unique asset for us that's going to enable us to be successful in Bakersfield. To give you an idea, the building appraised at over $150 million, and we paid $48 for it. Plus we got over $4 million for them to stay in it and rent for the first part until December. And they're going to pay us over, I think it's 1.7, is that right, Mike? 1.6 to stay in it till 2022, they're 1 floor. So we'll probably lease out another floor and then take 2 floors for ourselves plus the basement. So it's going to be a really strategic asset for us, and at the end, I saw Casey in here walking around. Casey's working on, we're going to have covered parking. We're going to put solar panels up for covered parking throughout the parking lot for employees. We're doing a lot of things to try to, again, make it a great place to want to work. It's at a really great location, as you all know. And in addition, most people don't understand is we also got 40 acres surrounding it with the deal. So over time, as we develop the building, that acreage will be worth more. We'll probably sell it off over time or do something with it. So in the end, my end game is we're going to get an infinite return on this, because the benefits and the value we'll take out of it will be well in excess of what we had. At the peak, we had 11 or 12 different buildings in Bakersfield. We're currently 8 or 9. So it gives you a feel for all of us being able to go into one building. Our single largest workforce is really going to be a powerful statement, I think, for ourselves and for the city of Bakersfield. I think one cool thing we're going to do is we renamed the street going in Heroes Way, and there are 2 individuals who won the Medal of Honor in Bakersfield. We're going to put plaques up honoring them as you come in the building, and we got permission from their families, and we're going to do that and have probably a little ceremony right there by the flagpole, and they'll have a plaque with their citation for how they got the Medal of Honor. So I think that'll be really cool, and that'll probably kick off when we really move in the building. Moving into the building will probably be in phases. I think we'll move in the logs, the cores, the files, all those things will go in first. All wanted to be in cubicles, they all said, and then that didn't work, and then they ended up in all these things that look like jail cells.
So first of all, I want to know, do you think Jerry Rivers is going to be able to deliver a playoff berth for the Chargers? But maybe to extend that, one of the things that you and I have had conversations about is what you learn about leadership both from sports and in being in the military and at West Point. And West Point really being more of a leadership training than just a military training. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I think we've seen some streams of that through the conversations today.
Half right. Philip Rivers.
Oh, Philip Rivers? Oh, sorry.
I think it's unique. You know, hindsight, West Point is probably the only one of the military academies that truly teach you about leadership. And I think the one thing it teaches you more than anything is you learn that leadership is not about you, it's about the people you're leading. And I think that's what people fail to realize right away. So, that's really the mission of the military academies. You got to remember, if you're at the Naval Academy, about 13-14% go into the Marines, so they'll have a similar mission, but the vast majority of them become staff officers on a ship and don't lead anybody. But the folks who go to the military academy, you know, all of us end up being platoon leaders and leading 30 to 40 people right away after graduation. So I have this, you know, I was at Fort Benning, then I was at Fort Irwin, and I'm with Sergeant Matthau, who is a Vietnam veteran at the time. And what am I going to teach Sergeant Matthau, my platoon sergeant, about leadership? And we had a clear-cut conversation, kind of like I was mentioning. You know, my wife and I, we were married for 5 years before we decided to have kids, because we had a very clear plan and we talked things out. You know, we're both engineers, so maybe like, this is what things that have to happen before we're willing to have kids, because this is the kind of environment we want to foster. But it was the same way there. We made pretty clear, myself and Sergeant Matthau, real clear about what am I going to do, what are you going to do, how we're going to lead this group of soldiers to be successful. So I think that was the number one thing I took. There's many things, but the one thing I will bring up that I thought it was brought up many times in different ways is nothing is beneath you as a leader. Nothing is beneath you. I heard people say, you know, volunteer, volunteer. Hey, nothing is beneath you. Do whatever it takes to be successful. And people take notice. And I know it might be, to Mandy's point, taking notes, but it's not just that. I'll never forget, and this is the old culture of our industry and frankly our predecessor company. When I first started work there, I'll never forget, people would walk by the copy machine to like where Sean's sitting, and the copy machine was here, to ask an admin to make a copy for them. And it's just stunning to me. It's like, look, I don't care what it means. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and we got to make copies, you're going to make damn copies so we can be successful. And if you have that mentality, if you're going to do whatever it takes to be successful, that'll make you successful. And I call it a mission focus, because that's the other part about the civilian world, is they have their eyes on the clock, and for the wrong reasons. It's about, what am I doing to accomplish my personal or the company's mission that I'm trying to accomplish? And how could I help everyone be successful? And put that in perspective and understand there's no clock on that. And sometimes there is for personal reasons, but everyone adapts. And that's the other part about communication, making sure people understand how can you fit in. Hey, I'm gonna have to step out for a few hours because I gotta do something with my kid with practice, but I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna step right into this and get engaged again. I think that's the kind of dedication when you want to distinguish yourself. Melissa's, Central Valley operations. Hey, if whatever it takes at that point, you got to recognize I'll help out, I'll adapt, I'll make sure that it happens. I think the most important thing to understand in leadership is position power. Being a leader, appointed a title, is the weakest form of power. Understood how to add value and how to lead folks and make the change needed to make us successful. So I think that's what you got to understand. Leadership is about, at the basic premise, it's about the people you lead. If it's about you in any way, shape, or form, you're wrong. And I'll just tell you why. My own story is, when I was at Oxy and I'm sitting there kind of near the steering wheel, And I started thinking about, well, what could I do one day? I think, yeah, when you actually understand what the CEO has to do, you think about, I don't really want to do that. And I thought, well, I could be the CFO, I could do this, I could do that. But then when you finally come to terms with, you're the best person, and I felt like I was the best person to be CEO, then you realize it's not about you anymore. It was about the folks here in the room and the folks around CRC. And that was the decision that made the difference for me in the end. And that's why it has to be for you. It can't be, boy, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm hoping my boss will die or get promoted so I can get that role. No, okay? You have to understand that that isn't your only career path, okay? Your career path can go a lot of different ways, but you have to be able to communicate up and down the chain of command what you would like to do and how you could add value, because there's a lot of things we do that are unique to us and our company and our industry. So we do a lot of cool things and get involved. And it isn't just simply oil and gas. Over here. I can hear you. I'll repeat it. The question is about top people leaving the company and what have we done to try to prevent that. I think you're going to die because of them, okay? So don't have people around you who aren't going to be supportive of you and what you're trying to accomplish in your role. So for us, it's making sure we identify and nurture those people and get them in roles that they do work that matters. And it's something we keep a close eye on. You know, I talk with Alana a lot about this. Again, you're going to have some attrition. I can't remember the lady's name who went back because her mom had Alzheimer's. Where you can do enough things as opposed to, you know, some town like Midland or some of these other areas. I'll tell you a funny story. So a lot of you know my dad was a geologist for Tenneco for many years, and we moved all the time. And one of his things he always said to me was, there's two places we don't want to ever get transferred to. And I said, what were those two? He goes, Midland, Texas, and Bakersfield, California. And so, I'll never forget, we were in our house in London at the time, and the phone rings, and he says, guess what, we're moving to Bakersfield, California. And I said, wasn't that one of the two places you said we never want to move to? But you know, it turned out fine for me. Met my wife here, had a great time here, and it's a great community, and it's grown tremendously. But it's one of those things that you have to figure out, is it for you? You know, I'll never forget at the spin, everyone was telling me, Chad's going to leave. He wants to leave. The next thing you know, he's buying a place in Tehachapi. So, so everyone has their own unique thing, but we want to keep the people we want to keep. And if you're not a team player, you not want to be a part of CRC, hey, you know, Sean said it, believe or leave, right? So it's important because you want to foster that environment where people want to go to work. You don't want to think of it as a job, you want to think of it as a career. You want to go in and you don't want to hate going to work and being around people you don't like. And that's why leadership is so important. If the leadership understands what those wants and needs you have, that's why you'll want to stay, and that's why you want to contribute, that's why you want to do great things and be around the folks you're around. A great thing to see it take up its form and advance this far. I mean, it's really outstanding. And great ideas to do more stuff, let us know. I mean, be communicative. Clearly, I think the word will get out after seeing this. It's a great learning experience. It's a great networking experience for people in the company to learn and meet folks from elsewhere. So I think it's so important.
Almost at the end of the day. So we want to call someone special to the stage. This person has put a lot of effort. I'm sure Katie will have something to say about this. So we're going to call Jeanette Peterson. She was the organizer for this lovely event today.
You. Jeanette has really been the mastermind behind this entire conference. I mean, everything that you see today is because of her and her amazing team. So thank you so much. Without you, this would not have been possible.
You rock, Jeanette.
And also thank you all for coming.
And I would like to thank the committee who made this all possible. It was a pleasure working with all of you.
Okay, and before we move on to the most fun part of this event, I think, well, there were so many fun parts, but you know what I mean. I'd like to thank someone that it's actually driving change in our community. We count with her presence here today. I believe she's still here. And her name is Cheryl Scott. Could you please stand so that everyone can see you? She's the VP and Executive Director of the Planet Economic Development Foundation. Cheryl is organizing an amazing project that will impact the life of 50 young girls from Button Willow. We have the opportunity to be a part of it. As if you see on the slides, she's working on this project, County Women working in STEM careers to serve as mentors and role models for those girls in Button Willow School District. There will be, like I mentioned before, about 50 girls, and the pool is the goal, I believe, is about 50 mentors. And we want to pair maybe a couple of mentors. So if you're not from Bakersfield, but you want to be a part of it, you can partner up with a mentor from Bakersfield so that you can share the activities that we will be taking these girls onto. Activities include showing girls etiquette for dinner or for going out to, formal events. You can go ahead and go to the room next door if you want to.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Wait. Hold on, look at me. Look at me.